Good evening. This is the July 21st, 2020 Board of School Directors special meeting on the topic of COVID-19 health and safety planning. If you are signed up to speak in time and met the timeline, you will be called upon at the appropriate time and recognized and unmuted to allow you to speak. There are a number of people who signed up after the deadline or submitted requests that we were not able to add in to speak in order to follow our process and procedures. I do want to note, Madam Chair, President, the Vice President's filling in for the President in person. You have more than 10 people signed up, so the board will need to make a decision regarding the number of requests that have come in. At this time, I'll turn it over to the presiding officer and the board secretary to begin the meeting.
All right, thank you, Dr. Benton. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and if we can move on to the roll call.
Mr. Hemingway?
Here.
Ms. Deeroff?
Here.
Mrs. Hogan?
Present.
Mrs. Denon? Mr. Brophy?
Here.
Ms. Nyman?
Here.
Mrs. McWhirter?
Here.
Mr. Updegrove?
Here.
Mr. Foose?
Here.
All present.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would just like to hand this over for a moment to Mr. Foose. He wanted to make a brief statement before we get started.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you to everyone for attending tonight's meeting, either in person or virtually. I had hoped to be able to join my colleagues tonight. However, I recently returned from a state where it is recommended that I self-quarantine for 14 days. I felt that it was prudent to follow this recommendation, and my employer has also asked that I heed this recommendation. While I intend to be a full participant in tonight's meeting through the Zoom platform, I felt that it would be best and certainly more efficient to allow our Vice President to chair tonight's meeting in person. Tonight we will be discussing some issues where there is a great deal of public interest, and we are doing so in a different format than we are accustomed to. I ask that my colleagues and the community listening to please be respectful of these circumstances. With that, I look forward to a productive, respectful, and thoughtful discussion. Mrs. McWhirter, thank you very much for filling in for me this evening.
No problem. Thanks, Mr. Foose. I would like to start by asking Mrs. Kincade, how many people do we have signed up to speak?
Excuse me. We had 14 people, and then we had a few who signed up after I sent the email.
At 3 minutes each, I'd like to move that we extend the public comment period to 60 minutes.
I'll second that.
All right, do we need to have discussion on this, or can we just go to a vote? Go to a vote? A discussion? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Nyman, for speaking up to me. Thoughts? Anybody have opinions on extending this to 60 minutes instead of the regular 30? We do have a lot of people.
I have a comment.
Mr. Updegrove.
I can't figure it out.
Are we having a meeting after the 60 minutes then? Is that, because we're already 15 minutes into this meeting.
Yes, we would have the meeting, but I think it's important to hear from the community. They do have a lot to say. These are their children.
I understand that, but I've been reading all the emails and all the comments that have been on the meetings, but if it's going to be an hour, it's okay. If everybody else okay, because we already spent 15 minutes here, so.
Mrs. McWhirter, I have a comment, but I can't figure out how to raise my hand since I'm also joining virtually.
All right, I saw Mr. Brophy's hand up, and then I will go to you, Mrs. Hogan.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I believe that the 14 people that signed up in time should be allowed to speak. So whatever it takes to get those 14 people, I would agree to.
All right, Mrs. Nyman. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Mrs. Hogan.
I agree that we should also allow everyone who signed up to speak and have their time. I think this is an important topic. Thank you.
All right, and then Mrs. Nyman. Ms. Nyman, I apologize.
I would agree to the 14 people that signed up prior, but keeping it to the 3-minute time limit.
Okay. And Mrs. Denon.
I think this is one of these exceptions because this is a very important topic. So I am fine with letting the 14 people who signed up speak.
All right. Does anybody else have any other opinions? And I just want to remind everybody to mute themselves once they're done speaking.
I just want a clarification on what the motion is. Your motion was to extend the period to 60 minutes, but what I'm hearing from most of the board members is that to allow the 14 individuals who signed up subject to the 3-minute requirement, which would not be 60 minutes in duration. So I just wanted to clarify that so there's no ambiguity regarding the action that's being taken right now.
All right, so Brandon and I would need to rescind our motion and then put a second motion forward,
Well,
is that correct?
Well, you both could agree if you're willing to modify the motion to permit the 14 individuals who signed up on Ms. Kincaid's list to speak, subject to the 3-minute requirement, and that the public comment period will be extended to accommodate the 14 individuals.
All right, I have no problem changing the motion to what Mr. Sultanic just described. Brandon, Mr. Foose?
Yes, I'm fine with that too.
Okay. Can we go forward with the vote now? Okay.
Mr. Hemingway?
Yes.
Ms. Deeroff?
Yes.
Mrs. Hogan?
Yes.
Ms. Denon?
Yes.
Mr. Brophy?
Yes.
Ms. Nyman?
Yes.
Mrs. McWhirter?
Yes.
Mr. Updegrove?
Yes.
Mr. Foose?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
All right.
Madam President, to make this flow in a somewhat organized fashion, there were requests that were submitted in writing for the secretary to read it rather than hop back and forth, because we typically take them in an order timestamp, but it may be easier for her to, those that came in time, just read them first, and then we can go to the list that way so we don't jump back and forth. So Ms. Kincade has some that came in on time that I would recommend that she just reads those first before we go to the ones on the screen that we need to let speak.
Are those part of the 14? Are those part of the 14?
She's asking any of the ones that for reading, did they come in time? Okay, while reconnecting, since she dropped, I'll change that order and then go ahead and find the first speaker.
All right, so I will read the statement. But before I start, I just want to acknowledge that we are dealing with an emotional and divisive topic today. So on behalf of the Board of School Directors, I would like to welcome you to this meeting. We welcome your attendance and input from stakeholders to assist us with making recommendations and decisions related to the Boyertown Area School District. The procedures and rules for public participation are detailed in the BASD Board Policy 006. This document is available at this meeting and on the BASD website. Participants properly registered on the sign-up sheet will be recognized by the presiding officer. This public comment period is limited to topics on tonight's agenda. Participants must preface their comments by an announcement of their name, address, and group affiliation if that is appropriate. All statements, inquiries, or comments shall be directed to the presiding officer. No participant may address or question board members individually, administrative team members individually, school employees, or members of the public individually. Note that we value and will not compromise the privacy of our students and staff. Please see us outside the realm of a public meeting if you have concern about an individual staff member or student. If your public comment includes a question, Dr. Bedden or a member of his staff will be in contact with you to confirm your question and provide you with the information. Comments are limited to 3 minutes, and comment periods are limited to 30 minutes, and we've changed that to accommodate the 14. Individuals may indicate desire to speak a second time if there's time left in the 30-minute period, which there won't be today. Finally, note that we do record our board and committee meetings and we post them on YouTube with a link on our website. We request that if you do wish to take pictures or record the meeting yourself, you do so in a non-disruptive and discreet manner and use those materials respectfully and responsibly. Thank you. Mrs. Kincade, are you set to go?
On now.
All right, I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, this is a statement that was sent in by Katrina Gregory. I'm a Bash alumni. At my time in Boyertown High School, I had a wonderful teacher by the name of Linda Mitchell. Mrs. Mitchell taught English, my favorite subject. There was not a single student I know who disliked her. She taught me how to write research papers, something I've been commended on in college. She would always tell stories about her grand cat. She made learning enjoyable. Mrs. Mitchell passed away in April due to COVID-19. I know the pain I felt as someone who had this teacher years ago. The news of her death shook me and my peers. I cried for days for a woman I hadn't seen in over 5 years. I can only imagine the pain current students would feel at losing the teachers they have now. No one should have to mourn the completely preventable loss of a mentor. Teachers are not impervious to this virus. Lunch staff and janitors and librarians are not impervious to this virus. Students will spread COVID-19 like wildfire. Imagine one asymptomatic student in class with approximately 25 other students per class period and a teacher. Even if the students do not catch this virus, which assure you they will, the teachers will interact with one another, and then the teachers will return home. Their spouses will contract it. Their spouses will go to work and spread it through their workplace, and so on and so on. Soon enough, the entire community will have COVID. There are places where social distancing will not be possible. What happens on the school bus? Passing periods are always crowded. The cafeterias are always jam-packed as well. Our entire community is at risk by opening these schools in the fall. If you reopen, students' mental health will be impacted. What happens when students feel guilt for giving their families COVID and they die? What happens when teachers contract it and die? What happens when their peers die or are hospitalized? Lastly, even there are no deaths, COVID is causing permanent lung damage, strokes, among other long-term impacts on individual health. COVID-19 is a novel virus. Viruses do not just leave the body after you are healed. Chickenpox can cause shingles years later because that virus has long-term effects even after the initial onset of symptoms have been healed. We do not know COVID-19's long-term effects yet, but given that stroke is common among survivors, I'm not sure many want to find out firsthand. There are lives on the line. Know what is truly at risk before you reopen. Go remote. Until there's a vaccine, schools are not safe to open. The next statement is by Stephanie Dieterich. Since I am not able to speak virtually, I am allowing Mrs. Kincade or the board chair to read the following in my absence. I'm coming to you as a parent, taxpayer, emergency responder, and the parent representative to the district's pandemic committee. I, like many other parents, was appalled at the behavior and comments made by some board members. I can tell you that the pandemic committee put in countless hours putting together the scaffolding plan that was presented during the meeting on July 14th. I can assure you that the focus of the committee is safety for all students while meeting the educational needs of all students within the district. The 5-4 intent to move to a full 5-day in-person instruction for all students that was expressed is the most irresponsible choice at this time. I was disheartened to hear board members use the comment period to politically grandstand and accuse the administration and committee of listening to news and media outlets to gather information. Furthermore, I was appalled that a board member seemed to justify 3 children dying in Florida because of their underlying conditions. What kind of person believes a statement like that is okay? Watching the subsequent social media explosion after the meeting last week, there are a large number of parents who have stated that their choice for in-person instruction has changed since the survey. Also, parents that were okay with sending their child back under the present plan would no longer be okay with sending their child back to in-person instruction. While ultimately it is the parent's choice as to what they are comfortable with, it should be your duty as board members to choose the option that best meets the needs of most students in the district. This is not the time to call on your personal feelings on masks or whether you agree with politicians or keeping up with personal vendettas against district administration. You need to be able to look at the broader picture. I can say I am not 100% sold on masks. However, if I were in your position, I would not hesitate to agree with requiring them for in-person instruction. I am able to see past my personal feelings and realize that there are other people who feel differently and would expect me to act appropriately. Districts around us are not even offering full 5-day in-person instruction for all students. In other local school districts, social media communities, it was mentioned that BASD was the clear example of what not to do if the vote would go 5-4 for full 5-day instruction for all. If the 5-4 comes to fruition, I hope the 5 that expressed intention for full 5-day in-person instruction for all students are able to bear the weight of losing students and money to cyber options outside of the district or BOL. The consequences of your irresponsible actions will be felt for years to come, long after some of you will be sitting on the board. Stop making a mockery of our district and administration. Get over yourselves and your ego and put the best interests of all students first. Thank you. That concludes the statements that I have.
Madam Chair, the first person on the list for sign up is Jennifer Millard. And I do see her logged in. Ms. Millard, can you hear me? Ms. Millard? You need to unmute your mic.
There we go.
There you go. Can you hear us now? Ms. Millard, we can't hear you. Are you all hearing her? No, I just unmuted her, that's all, and she's unmuted. Yes. The next is Tricia Conver. I need to search for her. Again. Ms. Conver?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all for,
Go ahead.
thank you for allowing me to speak and for the time. I'd like to thank Dr. Bedden and the entire pandemic team for the work that they've done. I'd like to share a few thoughts as you consider the options that were presented to you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about my health and safety concerns, but rather I'm going to talk about my educational concerns, as I know that that was a driving factor for many of you. I'm a parent of a senior and a second grader. My youngest thrives on the consistency and routine that school offers. My senior, and I for that matter, want nothing more than for her to experience her senior year. She has set some very high goals for herself and has worked hard for what she wants to accomplish after graduation. I want to see her achieve these goals. I know that many parents feel the same, and I speak to these parents that also want their children back in school. I hear you, but there are some things that we need to consider. I'm also an educator. I've done extensive work around SEL. Part of the work that I do is supporting teachers and administrators in creating high quality learning environments that not only meet educational standards, but also support the critical social emotional skill development. Research is clear. It tells us that the environment in which children learn is just as, if not more important than the actual curriculum. The hybrid plan created supports the health and safety guidance that the state has issued while also supporting the high quality learning environment. With a full reopening, classes will look nothing like they should. Things will be drastically different and the educational level will suffer. When I talk about environments, I'm not just talking about the physical space of our buildings. An environment that is conducive for learning includes the schedule of the day, the overall tone of the classroom, the teacher's ability to interact and support children in individualized and developmentally appropriate ways. Full reopening will not allow for an environment that is supportive of children or teachers. Environments will be sterile, children will be isolated, teachers will not be able to teach in a way that is supportive of learning. The classroom environment directly impacts the brain's ability to retain learning. I want my children to grow up to be successful, happy adults that can maintain jobs, have healthy relationships, be well-rounded individuals. Those skills are what are being developed right now. The impact on our child's mental health is likely to be significant and long-lasting. Our schools were already lacking in social emotional learning and resources prior to the pandemic. We do not have the capacity to support children and teachers with a full reopening. This is a space we have never been in before. I urge the board to listen to the pandemic team. They're the ones that are in our schools every day. They understand what scheduling looks like, how things work logistically, and what the teachers and children need. They also have an understanding of what the district facilities are like and the resources. They've thought out carefully what will happen if someone becomes sick, how we will minimize substitutes, and logistically, again, what we are capable of. I'm sorry? Go ahead. Okay.
Time, you can finish your last statement.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said, Dr.
The time is up, 3 minutes. I'll
Oh,
let you know
okay.
the time is up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person, Madam Chair, is Andrew Heizmann. Mr. Heizmann?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, my name is Andrew Heizmann, and I reside within New Hanover Township at 2411 Fairview Lane, Gilbertsville, PA. My family has 4 children, aging from 7 to 10, attending school this fall. In addition, I am a public school teacher with over 17 years of teaching experience. My comments herein pertain to the school board meeting on July 14th about the school plan.
Mr. Heizmann?
Yes?
Can you just stick to the tonight's agenda?
Yes, that's what I'm referring to, the
Okay.
school plan, thank you. The Pennsylvania Department of Health has a current order to wear masks indoors, period. A member remarked that he doesn't support the mask mandate and that, quote, as a school board member, hopes we have some say. You do not, sir. You do not get to gamble with our children and our teachers' lives. In addition, on July 16th, the Pennsylvania Department of Health added the guideline for schools to return with the social distancing of 6 feet. Not 3, not 4, not 5, 6 feet. I would like to ask, how do you expect to fit the entire school population into a building with a 6-foot social distance? Without addressing this question, that decision would be irresponsible. A member remarked that the health and safety of our children is just as important as their education. Thank you, yes. 5 school board members' preference on everyone returning to school full time. I implore the plan committee to please make the feasibility of a full-time return inside school buildings with all grade levels clear. I doubt that it can be done. Dr. Bennett even remarked everything that we talk about that makes good instruction, a lot of those tools we can't use in a social distancing model. A member argued in favor, stating that children are less affected by the virus. In addition, children appear to be less prone to passing it to adults. A New York Times article on July 18th mentioned a South Korean scientific study of over 65,000 people, indicating that your statement is only true for children up to 10 years of age. It also stated that children above the age of 10 are just as potentially affected and transmitting the virus as adults. Sending all students back full-time to school ignores the 58% hybrid and 28% online community survey response.
30 seconds.
The committee original plan accommodates all aspects of what I've said. My last statement, if a child dies and you are face-to-face with that child's parent under oath in a court of law, are you prepared to say you chose to take every precaution available in mitigating the risks of COVID-19 in our schools? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Jodie Sell is next.
Hello,
Sell, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Beautiful. My name is Jodie Sell and I live in New Hanover Township. And I have 2 students in the school system. So good evening and thank you for your time. Your mission statement and goal is to cultivate an exceptional, innovative learning community. It enables all students to succeed in a changing world. And I encourage all stakeholders and decision makers to walk in another man's shoes, in this instance, our children. Observe the surfaces touched by your children and your grandchildren. Think about lunches in classrooms with food allergies. Observe the protocols businesses and offices have had to practice and think about what that would look like in our Boyertown classrooms and buses. To speak to the spread of the disease and the faith that kids don't get it or don't die from it as much. Realize there's a difference of mortality rates and morbidity rates. As a daughter of someone who is drastically impacted by polio, I do know the long-term effects of viruses that do stay with us. And I'm not saying that COVID-19 causes paralysis, but I am asking all decision makers to consider all the effects of COVID-19, including hospitalizations, intubations, and new studies of multisystemic inflammation diseases. Does the district want to be held responsible if there are long-term medical effects, including brain, heart, lung, and coordination problems related to the reopening of schools? To say that this disease has little impact on children is more than a misnomer. And if we set aside the precious cost of life and simply talk about the cost of educating in person for a moment, to clean each bus per run, as recommended, to offer PPE, including a mask and shield, for either teacher and staff, sanitizer and soap for each classroom, and the recommended cleaning solutions for a district this size. Other districts have estimated over $95,000 per week. Where is this budgeted? And if the answer is the federal or state, you may remember that you furloughed 18 staff members in June in anticipation of a lack of funding. So what is the protocol when, not if, children and staff are exposed to COVID-19? If closed spaces are limited currently to less than 25 people in a sustained time? What about our classrooms or our buses? And if an exposed staff member needs to stay out 10 whole school days, it will cost the district $1,500 for each exposed teacher, and only if you can find a sub to enter that room. At what cost? Are we fully reopening our classes? So what can we do? We can
3
be
seconds.
innovative leaders for our learners. And if we are clamoring for reentry because of the experience in the spring, please know that there's a better virtual option. Give Boyertown teachers and paraprofessionals the ability to meet with students virtually and synchronously for lessons, reading circles, and tutoring sessions. Rather than assign IXL or modules in asynchronous program, offer teachers the ability to teach safely. Offer support to get devices to each student, paper, books, or packets in the hands of those who want less.
Time. Next speaker is Christian Folks.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you and good evening. My name is Christian Folks of Washington Township. My son attends Washington Elementary. My wife and I have nearly 40 years of experience in education between us, both as classroom teachers and at the administrative level. This summer, we postponed our plans so that we could each work on the task force teams of our respective school districts to create health and safety plans. Our family knows firsthand the hundreds of hours spent by our committees and subcommittees to create the best option for students and their families. We have relied not upon news reports from the media or proclamations from politicians, but from the advice of medical and educational experts as to what would be the safest way for our students and families to return to our schools. We are confident Dr. Bedden and his team did this as well, and we thank them for their efforts. Dr. Bedden and his team were given the Herculean task of designing under extreme constraints a plan to provide the safest environment possible for the return of my son and thousands of other Boyertown students. Due to a decade of mismanagement by the longer-serving members of this board, they had to plan around school closures, staff cuts, and reduced budgets. However, they created a plan that would enable those who would benefit most from in-person learning, our elementary students, the most time in front of their teachers, while also affording our oldest students time in front of their teachers with the additional time used for online continuation of learning off campus, a skill which would be needed at higher education institutions. The proposed plan allowed students and staff to retain the safety measures suggested by the medical professionals in order to mitigate everyone's risk of exposure. I listened in horror last week as within 60 minutes of the presentation, 5 members of this board ignored the expertise of the Health and Safety Committee, ignored hundreds of hours of research, planning, and discussion, ignored the recommendations of medical professionals, and the common sense of any reasonable person. Your ignorance on this matter and the basic operation of classrooms and the methods which are employed by our teachers to deliver content have been exposed by your irresponsible and reckless behavior. You have decided to risk the health and well-being of not just my son, but of my entire family, as well as the families of every teacher, secretary, custodial staff member, food service worker, bus driver, and by extension, this community by promoting an ill-conceived notion of a full reopening. You've decided to play Russian roulette with this community, only this time you provided extra ammunition. When presented with the fact that at least 3 children have died from this virus so far, one of the COVID-5 board members promoting a full reopening, responded with, and I quote, 3 with underlying symptoms. I question if his response would be the same to the families of his fellow board members who continuously reference their grandkids as the reason behind their decisions. Could he really be so callous to say that the life of a child with asthma or an autoimmune disorder or who suffers from obesity means less? Would he simply shrug his shoulders in your face while your child is suffering from this illness? My wife and I thought we'd be using our time tonight to inquire about why Boyertown's only virtual option is through ingenuity, why Boyertown teachers are not being tapped to provide virtual synchronous instruction option to families. Those, after all, are some of the very real questions that need to be answered. But instead, this time is being used as board members to abandon this ridiculous idea of a full reopening. So to the COVID-5, you are wrong on this one. Stop this now. Accept the recommendation of the task force. Let them do their work. Thank you for my time.
Next is Donna U. Savage. I'm going to assume Donna U. is Miss U. Savage.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
All right, this is Donna U. Savage from Upper Frederick Township. I'd like to speak on the COVID-19 school reopening plan. So let me start by saying I don't know the right answer, and I don't believe there is any good answer. What I'd like to do tonight is provide you perspective from someone with 31 years of public health career experience and 10 years of experience in your shoes on the BASD board. In my career in pharma, I've had the privilege of being surrounded by brilliant and esteemed medical professionals, statisticians, health economists, and epidemiologists. The two things that I learned from my career that helped me assess the COVID-19 pandemic situation are, one, how to make sense of a large volume and wide variety of data, considering the source, the scientific merit, and the biases, including my own. And second, a great appreciation for how little we know about how the human body works and about the world around us. What you are facing today is very different from typical board decisions. Typically, we attempt to balance the quality and scope of education with the cost of those decisions. That is exactly what you swore your oath to do per the Pennsylvania School Code, to provide a thorough and efficient system of public education. But now you're required to balance the safety of our students, staff, and community with the quality of education. This is a very different situation, very onerous, and I'm sure very, very thankless. 3 points I'd like to make are, first, in all of your school board work, periodically step back and examine your own motives and biases. It's so easy to get caught up in the backroom drama. You can only control yourself, so make it a point to check yourself and ensure you're sticking to your sworn duty and doing so most effectively. And as the leaders of the entire district, remember that you set the tone and example for everyone. Second, respect the experts. You were presented with a very thoroughly considered proposal, and you asked some very insightful questions. Our administrators are the people best suited to evaluate the pandemic data as it relates to educational outcomes. You have a lot to consider, so there's nothing wrong with asking for more information, but respect administration's expertise. And third, the novel coronavirus is called novel for a reason. It's new. Scientists have never seen it before, and we're learning more every day about how it spreads, how it evolves, the short and long-term effects of the virus on humans, and how to develop treatments and vaccines. Therefore, the information you receive will continue to change, so you need to be able to modify your plan on a dime. How will you modify the plan in the face of new mandates or if cases spike? How will you transition to normalcy if it seems appropriate? And what will the triggers be for doing so? In closing, I sincerely believe that the large majority of this board has the will and the ability to do the right thing. Please lead us wisely and responsibly. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to speak tonight.
Christina Gregory is next. I have an Emily Gregory. Is that Christina also, or is Emily different? You already read that? Okay. Madeline Carosell. Carosell, you can unmute your mic.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, my name is MADELINE. I live in Gilbertsville and have been in the school district for about 17 years. I have a child in senior high and one that already graduated in 2019. I would like to thank the board for an obviously thankless position that they have been put in that is beyond their control. No one wanted or expected this to happen. I applaud those of you on the board for being open and considering all options, and I believe doing what is best for Boyertown School District and our children. I listened and watched the webinar last night and found them very informative and helpful. We need to be looking at the facts for our area and not other areas. You cannot go by what is happening in the whole state of Pennsylvania. You need to concentrate on Boyertown Area School District. And if you listen to Dr. Bedden last night, they are paying attention to what the rules are and will abide by them and what is required. This is a no-win situation. Not everyone will agree. Not everyone gathers the same information. And if they do not look at it the same way. Some prefer to only concentrate on the negative and to attack others for not believing what they believe. There's enough negativity going on in this world that it would be nice if more people looked on the positive and tried to come up with solutions and not bash every idea that comes through except the only one that they want. If parents do not want to send their children to school, do not send them. There are many online options for you. I respect your decision if you are afraid to send your children to school. So please respect ours that do want to send our children to in-person school. There's enough data out there that if precautions are taken properly, the likelihood of contracting COVID goes down. Education, socializing, in-person interaction, etc., is key to our children's future. They need it and they want it. Parents can only educate their children, Parents can also educate their children on safety precautions and safety practices due to what we are faced with today. Studies show, and it is a fact, that it is good for their mental health and well-being to go back to school learning and to have some sort of familiar routine. I know some are now saying, isn't your child's physical health a concern? Or I must not care about my child's physical health? Will I answer you? Of course I do. I pay attention to
30 seconds.
in our area and do not find it concerning not to try and give my child the education that she wants and needs. Thank you, Boyertown School Board, if you go with the option to go with in-person schooling, whether it is full-time or part-time. Thank you.
Jon Emeigh is next. Mr. Emeigh, if you, there you go.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
You can start.
Okay. Like Mr. Savage before me, I've been a scientist working in pharma for 30 years. And
Mr. Emeigh, can you state your name and your address?
Yes, sorry. Jon Emeigh, Gilbertsville, Pennsylvania. Like I said, I've been a scientist working in pharma for 30 years. And over the course of time, invariably colleagues would come and ask me to check their equations so they could make sure of their results. I quickly learned to stop doing that because their equations were almost always right. 99% of the time, it was the assumptions they made, not the equations that were wrong. So I started checking those instead. So I'd like to go through some of the assumptions that some board members have made in assuming that we can reopen the entire school safely. You've assumed student-age children don't get COVID much and don't spread it as much. As has been reported, we now know from results just coming in that except for ages 10 and below, this is absolutely not true. We also have an example of a country that went full reopen, Israel. They had COVID completely under control, and within 2 weeks of them reopening schools, they had to shut them down again. And now fully 47% of their new cases can be traced to one junior high school student body. You've assumed we've had a complete data set on student-age children. We don't. We've barely studied the effects of COVID on children because we focused on the very sick. We're just starting to study children in COVID now. You've assumed that if kids don't get a serious case of COVID, that at worst, it's like a bad cold or flu. We're finding out now that even in non-serious cases, there are a whole series of potential long-term complications because this virus attacks so many different human cell types and not just the lungs. You've assumed we can know again ahead of time who has an underlying condition and who doesn't. We now know lots of people who have caught this disease and had serious cases and found out about underlying conditions they never knew they had. And on top of that, we know in the United States that there are an estimated 18 million children with asthma and millions of others with other comorbidities. How many of those might be in Boyertown and the kids don't even know it? This is a new disease. Less than a year ago, it didn't exist, and the data changes on it every day. It's actually quite arrogant to assume that we can know anything definitive enough to justify putting our kids and our teachers at risk. And this leads to the final assumption that people are making, that we should put our teachers and children at risk. That the goal should be getting back to normal right away, no matter what it costs. That this is even
30 seconds.
that this is even considered a legitimate discussion point actually says to me some disturbing things about where we are with the soul of our nation. We have the tools to safely educate our children during this pandemic. Use them. Taking on risks you don't have to take on is not courageous, and trying to avoid them is not fear, it's prudence. We have the ability to help parents struggling to balance work and childcare. They're not simply economic units of input. They don't need to rush back to work. Help them. Your assumptions are flawed. Please
Mr. Emeigh, you're
reconsider.
done.
Thank you.
Next is Liz Theisen. Ms. Theisen?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, Liz Theisen from Gilbertsville. I'll have a daughter in Middle School East. Thank you to everybody who's been working on this. I've submitted to the board a petition signed by over 1,000 people that asks you to not do a full reopening during the pandemic. The signatures say a lot, but the comments say more. I hope you've read them. These are the family members of the people who you are considering putting into this situation. They are not pleased. I will not waste much time on the 5 full-day plan, as it is in no way a feasible plan given the capacities of our buildings and the number of people this would affect. The guidelines cannot be adhered to in this plan, and those guidelines are critical to this community's ability to mitigate the spread of a deadly and debilitating disease. I would like you to think back to New York City's early days when schools were open and the disease was spreading, and 30 paraprofessionals and 28 teachers died. They died. A quote from the director of Harvard Global Health Institute says, "The single biggest risk factor for spreading is bringing large number of people indoors for a long period of time. For example, schools," he says. So we do not need to do that. We cannot have large groups of people indoors for long periods of time. The hybrid plan has some merit. There are 2 big problems with it. First, in the elementary grades, K to 6, you have large class sizes indoors for long periods of time. Basically, you have all the biggest risk factors right there. Although they might not become immediately sick, children do get infected. They do damage their organs with long-term effects unknown. They do spread it, and their teachers are at a higher risk of severe complications and death from it. The elementary plan needs to do better and address the need for lower class sizes and less time indoors with large groups. The other problem is similar but affects the older grades 7 through 12. While in their buildings, their class sizes are going to be high on the days that they're there. Splitting each grade level into alternating days or times in person is the only way to lower those numbers. Personally, I think the biggest problem we're having with this emergency situation the virus brought onto us is childcare. If you say socialization and mental health, these classes as required with the safety measures will not address these problems. Classrooms will not be comfortable, social, or even learning conducive. In fact, they may have a greater negative impact on how our children view school for a long time after. None of the things that kids enjoy about school will be there, none. And although not perfect, virtual platforms do have a greater chance to afford all these things if they're done right. Remember, physical distancing does not have to mean social distancing. Childcare is a concern, and we have children with needs that are best addressed in person. If we focus on how to give them a safe haven with paid
30
aid,
seconds.
and the rest of the parents can keep their children home, teachers can teach remotely. We need to start thinking outside the box on this. I'd just like to point out one last thing. At the beginning of this meeting, one of the board members needed help muting himself, and another board member reached over his shoulder and helped him. We will not be able to do that with our own students in the classroom in the current conditions. Thank you.
Next is Shanah Black. Ms. Black,
Yes, I'm here.
you can start.
My name is Shanah Black. I live in New Hanover Township in Gilbertsville, Pennsylvania. I have 2 sons attended Gilbertsville Elementary School and will hopefully be attending New Hanover Upper Frederick with the redistricting. I have already submitted a letter to the board members and to Dr. Bedden, and I've summarized my letter to read to you today. Should I just start?
Yes, go ahead.
Started, yes.
After last week's meeting, I was left with the uncomfortable feeling that most of the board does not support me as a parent. My husband and I wish for and support a return to school for our children this fall, but this support is not unconditional. The return needs to be planned and executed in a safe, responsible, and well thought out manner. The return needs to address the concerns of our families, align itself with established PA health guidelines, and be chiefly constructed by our school subject matter experts, not board members who simply look up facts online. After reviewing the health and safety plan, I found it to be a thoughtful and professionally researched plan to return our children to the classroom, though I personally would rather see the blended reopening to create even more space in the classrooms and on the buses. I find it extremely irresponsible that the school board members would summarily disregard a plan that was developed by the people who know our children best and are intimately aware of the abilities and constraints of our school facilities, transportation needs, and the faculty and staff members. More important than a return to the classroom is making sure that the children can stay there once they return and that their health and safety are paramount. I was further disappointed with the comments made by one of the board members during the July 14th meeting about trying to find a way to not wear masks in our district. This is a foolish idea. The masks are state mandated, and for that reason, it would be imprudent to devise or justify ways for our district to skirt around it. To that end, some board members did not reference PA health guidelines at all. It appears that the decisions for a complete 5-day reopen are based solely on the individual opinions of 5 board members. I am concerned that this decision is being driven by ulterior motives. Additionally, there appeared to be no regard from the board as to what would happen should any class be identified as having a COVID infection. Sending all students back to school at one time and filling up classrooms is irresponsible at best. I'm curious about how you will handle
30 seconds.
It is the district prepared for a lawsuit if someone loses life? I was completely appalled by the one board member's statement that the 3 deaths of children was just kind of, oh, well, it was okay. As parents, I'll have to skip ahead. We understand that we do not want to be in the position of the board. As Dr. Bennett pointed out, it's a lose-lose situation. However, these are unprecedented times, but in unprecedented times, call for supportive leadership from our district, not board members who fight, bicker, and serve their own
Madam Chair.
agendas. Thank you for your time.
Next is Nora, and I won't try Nora F. Nora?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Nora Filewicz. And I live in Gilbertsville, Pennsylvania. I have twin daughters that will be entering 6th grade. Dear school board members and administrative staff, I am speaking to you tonight with great sadness, disappointment, and disgust over last week's board meeting. It is evident that five board members do not care about or understand the safety of our children, teachers, and staff. It is apparent these board members have not properly researched the scientific data and or medical information available. Their unwillingness to even consider a modified schooling schedule shows their gross lack of understanding public education. They have blatantly disregarded and disrespected the scenario presented. By opening the schools 5 days a week with no modifications or safety measures put in place by the CDC, Pennsylvania Department of Health and Education, and other agencies, these 5 members will be using our children as pawns in their power struggle game within the board. This is irresponsible and unacceptable. The scaffolding scenario would be the best middle-of-the-road solution for many. It was thought out and well presented. I am thankful for the team that put it together. I feel it was the best option for working parents, which is an issue for many families. It is a good effort to keep students and teachers safe while providing an in-person education. However, I was very disappointed to learn that no online classes would be available to the elementary and middle school students. I think you are setting up our kids to fail by not providing online classes in case a shutdown should happen again. I am also very disgusted by a board member's comment that only 3 children died from COVID, but they had underlying medical conditions. Are you saying these kids do not matter? I have a daughter with asthma. Her life does matter, as does her education. Also, please tell me, does it not matter if she dies from COVID since she has a medical condition? The school admin obviously sees a need to protect our medically vulnerable children as they are hiring more medical caregivers for this pandemic. They will also work with the schools after COVID due to the medical needs of our kids, as stated in last week's meeting. The survey that was sent out was not well written and sent at a time when parents felt more confident in the number of cases. However, data and numbers are changing. That is how collecting scientific data works. Ultimately, it's up to the parents to decide what is best for their children, but your job is to guide us. You need to understand the information presented and make the best decision for a majority of our students, including constituents that do not live in your district. Public education needs to be provided to every child. That is the law. Boyertown School Board's mission statement is to enable all students to succeed in a changing world. Well, our world is changing daily. Instead of succeeding, the plan the 5 board members is suggesting will set up our kids' health to fail. Our children's health and well-being are at stake right now. It is the job of the board member we voted in to keep our kids safe, as well as providing an education. If schools did not have to keep them safe, why do we have fire drills or intruder drills? Why do we bring in dentists for assemblies to tell our kids the importance of brushing their teeth? Our nurses do yearly health screenings for our kids. Our kids attend school for more than just an education.
Time is up, Mrs. Filewicz.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Next up is Jeff Rehrig. Mr. Rehrig?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually going to reverse what I was going to take. I'm sorry, I'm Jeff Rehrig. I'm from Gilbertsville. I have 2 kids in Boyertown. So last week's meeting, there was a board member that I'm questioning the character. It was told several times about the 3 deaths, but prior to that, the board member actually had said that there was no deaths. When he was caught, he then said cavalierly, oh yes, well those 3, they had underlying symptoms. I think that's the issue that's occurring. As I'm listening to people talk about the concern of the 5 days, one of the board members has touched their face, their mask, put their hands up, done everything. Another board member, obviously, it was mentioned, needed help because they couldn't mute their thing. These are grown people, adults, that can't follow rules that are in place to protect others. And yet these same board members expect children to follow rules that are in place to try to protect that are not needed. So clearly, I mean, I believe face-to-face schooling is important. I think it's the best way for kids for self-being to learn. However, doing it safely, I think, is the most important piece. Based upon what I've heard, even from this call, what I've seen, I don't think we're ready for that. If the board members can't follow the rules that are supposed to be in place for our children, it seems it just doesn't seem to make sense. What is the purpose of it? The idea, yes, we want to have the kids' best education. Why can't we have remote education? Have quality remote education. The idea is whether or not I want to take my kids to go to PA Cyber School because they have instructor-led virtual training. Whereas the end of last year with their training methods that occurred, I get there were some other issues, whatever they were, kids didn't learn anything. But why is it that has to be the 2 choices? Either they don't learn or they have to go face-to-face. I think we as a school board, as a school district, they can do better. Dr. Bedden, I believe, outlined several different methods that could do a better job on that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chad Roth for BAEA. I can. Let me go back and find her. Mr. Roth can hold on.
All right, we're going to try and find Jennifer Millard again.
Ms. Millard? If you can unmute yourself, I can see you on your name. You just need to unmute your mic.
I guess we should go forward with the.
Here she is. Give me 1 second, Madam Chair.
Sure.
I wonder if she's using a phone. Looks like my screen says she's using a phone. I wonder if she's having difficulty. Try *6 or *9. I can't remember which one, Mrs. Millard. Okay. Next is Chad Roth, Vice President of the Boyertown Area Education Association. Mr. Roth?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Chad Roth, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Boyertown Area Education Association, the union that represents the professional staff members employed by the district. Our members' passion and livelihoods consist of working with the young people who attend school in the Boyertown Area School District. Our members love what they do, and since COVID-19, they miss working with students and are looking forward to the day that they can get back to work educating students in our schools. Whether the situation will permit that this fall remains to be seen, but like so many other community members and groups, some of whom spoke here this evening, our members tuned into the July 14th meeting to see what plans the district was preparing that would allow for a safe, productive return to education, whether it be face-to-face, scaffolded, hybrid, blended, or completely online this fall. We were disheartened by the discord we witnessed at the July 14th meeting as the board attempted to recommend a health and safety plan. After that meeting, we surveyed our members, and you saw or will see some of that data tonight or the other day. 59% of our members were very concerned about COVID-19 affecting themselves or someone in their family. Another 18% were labeled concerned, or labeled as concerned, rather. While everyone may have different feelings about the issues concerning the school's reopening, we see no one solution that fully resolves all concerns for all people. However, we did find that member and student health and safety is overwhelmingly the top priority for our members. No staff or student's personal health is more or less valuable than others. Further, our members, students, parents, and community place great trust in the board that it will consider all circumstances and direct administration to create a balanced health and safety plan, and subsequently, a balanced and flexible reopening plan that makes sense given the circumstances at any given time. A good plan must take all concerns into account, be flexible, and should be able to evolve with changing circumstances. Such plans are no doubt difficult to create due to the number of complexities and uncertainties that must be factored in, but are necessary in these unknown times in order to ensure students and employees feel comfortable, safe, and protected when returning to work in school under any reopening scenario. Only when safety concerns are met can students and staff get down to the business of educating students. Only when safety concerns are met. As educators, we understand and appreciate the complexity of the decision surrounding a health and safety plan and reopening of our schools, and how to deliver instruction to students in the midst of a pandemic. The situation is delicate, but you must consider the options deliberately and judiciously. The health and safety of our educational community rests in a well thought out plan. We have an interest in helping the district arrive at the best outcome. BAEA and its members look forward to being, sorry about that, I don't know why that's ringing. BAEA and its members look forward to being involved in the process to ensure the health and safety of students and staff, and to ensure our students receive the best education possible within decisions that are made by this board. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate the opportunity.
Madam Chair, that concludes the 14 that you all agreed to allow speak. Those who wanted to speak, you can still email Ms. Kincade if you'd like your statement submitted for the record for this meeting.
Well, it wasn't flawless, but did it do okay?
All right. So we need to move on to the COVID-19 health and safety plan. Do you have a presentation, or is this just going to be a discussion?
It's a presentation. President, the administration was asked in a special meeting to come back and answer some key questions. Significant to that question was what are the challenges or what could be is the issue with being able to, for us to go to a full opening, since that was one of the questions that was asked since the meeting last Tuesday. Additionally, we wanted to take this opportunity to update some of the work that has been going on since last Tuesday to the board and the public, and also articulate some of the challenges that we're having with some of that work that are related to the next two items that you see on your agenda. Can you all hear me? Because I have this face shield on. Okay. We wanted to make sure that there was a clear indication and understanding of what the timeline had been while we've been working on this. On June 5th, PDE released its health and safety plan template to schools. And as you can see by the name, the key part of that was to try to develop a health and safety plan. On the 15th, we reached out to and began Hanover Research Fall 2020 Planning Scenario Survey to families, which was about getting perceptions and feedback from our families and our staff with regards to their thoughts on certain key areas that the teams were using to develop the plan. On the 26th of June, a draft of the proposed scaffolding plan for reopening was shared with the board in a weekly report. At that time, we did not receive any concerns. On July 8th, the district memo outlining key components of the health and safety plan was also sent to all stakeholders. July 5th or 6th, I believe the board received a draft of that communication and again sought any feedback regarding that. On June 5th, I'm reading the top line, I forgot to go down to the bottom. June 8th was the district planning steering committee and teams established and they started their work. Then it was the Hanover Research Fall 2020 Planning Scenario Survey that went out to the families. On the 19th was when we sent to the board a copy of a moving forward planning update presentation in the weekly report. That also outlined information referencing developing a hybrid plan. On the 26th was when the scaffolding plan with the schedule of what it would look like went out during the weekly report. On July 3rd was the draft of the memo outlining the key components of the health and safety plan that went to the board. I believe we received a couple questions and comments. And then on the 8th, we sent out a memo outlining the key components to all stakeholders. On the 14th was the board meeting to share and review the district scaffolding plan for reopening. During that presentation, there were reference to two key components that meet and align with the district goals. The focus was that we would also be trying to make sure that the plan was supportive to our use of data and make informed decisions based on the resources that were provided to us. It was also with a focus on providing a positive, safe, and healthy learning environment. But also, again, directives from the state was a focus on health and safety. On July 28th, the BASD school board will be asked to approve a health and safety plan. A complete timeline was laid out for the board with the idea that the 14th would be a review, dialogue, modifications to the plan, brought back for the board and submitted for them to review, and then brought forward to the 28th of July. It was important that we were trying to hit that deadline because of the fact that we believe that we needed to get a decision to our parents with regards to what type of instructional program schedule that we would be offering. And additionally, to be able to plan for the return of teachers and do the work that we needed to prepare our teachers for coming back to school and what it would look like, which would be very different for them, either in their classroom if they return to their same school, or also making assignments to the new schools based on new configuration that we laid out for the health and safety plan. The key to that is that the guidelines were about instructional and non-instructional aspects. It was supposed to be tailored to the unique needs of each school. We clearly in our plan focused on level. And then of course we had to build a plan that was flexible to adapt to the changing conditions, which we will also outline later on what the state specifically talked about with that process. The initial planning goals was a safe return of staff and students to include in-person instruction. That is a hallmark of the health and safety plan that is required by the state, that if you're not there yet, how do you make sure that you can transition to in-person instruction? That we had to try to follow the new safety and health guidelines and protocols, which, as you know, has continued to evolve and change. And then the ability to transition between the phases. Currently, the state of Pennsylvania has outlined what they call green, yellow, and red phases. The red phase basically is no in-person instruction. The green and yellow phases are some are allowed in-person instruction based on the status and conditions that the local school district are dealing with. And of course, if there is no classification of color, we will be back into a traditional school format. This plan, as mentioned, I think by one of the speakers, was developed at a time when we were in green phase and the state was looking pretty good. The yellow phase was where we were supposed to be if we started seeing changes that were not favorable to the district. But the foundation was green, and then how you move to yellow should conditions get worse. Ultimately, of course, the state would declare a red phase and determine that there will be no school. We moved the 5th graders to middle schools. We moved the 7th and 8th graders to BASH for a combination of face-to-face and virtual learning on the same schedule as 9th graders. We moved 10th through 12th grade to participate in face-to-face instruction at BASH on the days opposite the 7th through 9th graders, and virtual sessions for the remaining days. We were also trying to create space in all buildings to reduce the volume of the students in any building at one time. The average capacity usage is about 75%, and in some cases we have a couple schools that are down to 60%. The goal was to be able to move between the green and the yellow without any loss of instructional time. The team was continually also behind the scenes while planning for that, trying to develop a plan of how we would meet our needs better than what we did in emergency closure if we went to the red phase. You will see some information about that tonight, but that has always been going on and behind the scenes. To answer the question regarding the challenges with the full return, we tried to simplify it and just line it up about pro and con. And as you can see, on the pro side of the full return, all students obviously receive face-to-face instruction. They come back to fairly familiar routines. It addresses the academic, nutritional, social, and emotional needs of all students face-to-face. It alleviates and addresses the child care demands for our parents and then our staff. are coming back to what they know as the norm. However, the challenges with it is that we pretty much, there's no way that we will even come close to meeting the social distancing guidelines. They're compromised in the classrooms, the hallways, the cafeterias, the arrival drop-off locations, and on buses. Even in our hybrid plan, with initial guidance that was given out, we were, in some cases, 6 feet, generally anywhere from 4 to 6 feet. The state has since come out with an expectation of 6 feet, but they also say to the degree that's feasible. But they are very clear that is the goal, to try to meet at 6 feet. It also would increase the potential spread of COVID-19. Since our last meeting, Georgia Tech has released data and giving indication of the likelihood of a person coming in contact with someone with COVID-19 based on the size of the population. We're now also analyzing that system and factoring it in to how we would function, because as you know, we have a high school that's built for roughly 2,400 students. The plan that we designed was going to get it down to about 1,600, and then try to focus on keeping students in smaller groups within the building. The con would be fewer open classrooms and spaces to utilize if we had confirmed cases arise, less staff available to cover classrooms when needed. We would overextend our custodial staff to maintain the required cleaning and sanitizing routines. We would be pretty sure subject to increased costs for cyber charter programs. This afternoon, we were on a conference call with our state legislators, all 18 superintendents in Berks County, and one of the consistent and major conversations was that it is open season on public education, traditional schools by cyber charters. They are aggressively recruiting students from our schools, and that was a consistent theme throughout the meeting from all of the superintendents. We'd have a dilution and a redirection of staff resources to address the needs of all students in the building. Fewer students, meaning staff have a better chance to be more focused in their supervision of students and trying to supervise them with meeting the hygiene and mitigation strategies that we want to put in place. We would absolutely have time lost to transitioning to the yellow phase. But I would go a step farther and be quite honest. This past week, I spent many meetings watching our staff scratching their head. The plan that we developed cannot align with a full opening. We literally are back to square one. A full opening does not allow us to transition to this hybrid plan like we're supposed to with the green and yellow. Because think about it, if we start in full, we got all of our kids 6th, 7th, and 8th. We cannot transition quickly to move them to a reassignments because teachers won't be where the students would have to be transitioned to go to this hybrid model. Overall, it is less safe and has low mitigation of the spread of COVID-19. Scaffolding. We've said from the get-go that there is no plan that's perfect. So again, pro and con, and there's some cons to even the scaffolding return. But we believe that we are better able to meet the social distancing guidelines. We are absolutely addressing the decreasing the potential of the spread of COVID-19 by decreasing the population of students in the building and the ability for within the larger building for teachers to spread out and staff to spread out the students into smaller groups. We have the ability to have more open classroom spaces to use for confirmed cases, and you'll hear more about that, what we mean by that. More staff available to cover classes when needed. Custodial staff will be more easily able to maintain the required cleaning and sanitizing routines. We have fewer students leaving for cyber charters. Staff ability to address needs of all students in the building will increase, and we'll have less instructional time lost if we have to transition between the state declaration of plans. It is a safer and better mitigation of COVID-19 spread. The negative, the con, is obviously we have fewer students receiving face-to-face instruction. Staff will have a lack of familiarity and routines with the students and staff because many of them will be working in different buildings, for example. Students will be in different buildings under this plan. And that will be addressed a little bit later of what we were planning to bring forward to try to help with that situation. We will be unable to address, we believe, in an appropriate manner, academic, nutritional, social, and emotional needs of all students face-to-face, it is decreased compared to the face-to-face. It creates a potential supervision issue, more so at the younger students for demands of parents who may still also want child care support. In summary, we presented and developed a plan because the focus was supposed to be on health and safety first, then with the goal of trying to still deliver quality instruction as best we can. We believe it was more effective in providing a mitigation of the spread of COVID-19, and it prioritized the health and safety of students, staff, and the community in this process. We looked at and considered a large volume of information, a large volume of data, a number of resources that you see listed there. As we shared last week, and in many cases, sometimes they didn't agree. There were conflicting guidelines, constantly changing guidelines. So this has been a constantly fluid, changing process with regular amounts of large volumes of reading and trying to see what's different from what we received in a prior communication. We asked for stakeholder input, which, as explained last night, was about stakeholder perceptions. Part of this process, we developed 4 teams even beyond just having the pandemic team that focused on operations, maintenance, and building management, parent, family, and community relations, social emotional learning, trauma-informed practices, and mental health, and then our hybrid models of teaching and learning team, which was part of the communication that went out in early to mid-June to the board, articulating that that was the teams that were being developed. You heard that BAEA conducted a teacher survey on their own, which they recently shared the information with us that we will share with the board. And of course, the Hanover research results that were presented in more detail last night. We have approximately 6,800 students in our school district. We received just over 3,800 responses. 3,031 of those were parents. 619 of those were staff. We have approximately 750 to 800 staff when you take out the CREST employees. So that is a high representation for staff, approximately 80% response rate from the staff. Our smallest group, of course, were our students. In summary, what we received from the BAE was that they received approximately 256 responses at the time that we received this information. As you heard earlier, there was 45% support or strongly support the initial hybrid proposal from the administration. 8.6% supported the proposed plan for full open. On the 14th, approximately 79% of those who responded were tuned in and watching the meeting. 77% were very concerned about COVID-19. Elements to be considered in the BASD plan that they want to be a high focus is that 92% of it said that health and safety of all students and employees above all else is being the priority. And 76% asked for a balanced instructional plan that carefully considers the health and safety of all, that can also be adaptable and change fluidly based on the circumstances that we may be facing. Key to the Hanover research survey, and again, more detailed was provided last night, that many of the questions asked in response fell on a continuum or a scale and not a rank order or specific preference. It was also highlighted that it was a survey, and we outlined the difference between a survey and a poll. A survey was geared towards getting perceptions and thoughts from your constituents. In some questions, the respondents were able to rate each scenario and could have given the same scale of response to multiple items. The percent shown for each response is out of 100. So you don't look at the responses and think they should equal 100. It was a percent on the scale of 100 for each item. For example, as you saw last week, you can see the all levels of stakeholders. When all levels were shown, it included every staff member that responded, every parent, and every student that responded to the question. In this particular case, it was, to what extent do you support or oppose the following instructional strategies? That's all levels and all possible groups. We were able to drill down and separate it out by elementary and secondary levels to see if there were any differences that were significant in the responses. Then we were also able to drill down in the group type. Parents compared to staff, and compare those as part of the decision-making process as we tried to balance both. You see in secondary parents versus secondary staff. So for example, you see a huge shift at the secondary level with regards to hybrid instruction compared to when you saw what it said in all and how they felt about it. Response related to the rotation schedule. And again, we were able to drill down either by level or type, whether it be a parent or staff member. And these are just sample screenshots. We had questions about logistics. In this particular case, parents and staff had the same top two, but a different priority of what was more important in this. And they were also able to select at least 3 options. This is what we're facing and the challenge that we're facing when it comes to our classroom. In a scaffolding return, we actually still could get 4 feet between desks, which was the original plan. 4 feet apart from students, the desks were 3 feet apart. In the secondary classroom, the desks were able to get 4 feet apart. In a full return, it drops down to just barely getting the desk to 3 feet. The seats 3 feet, excuse me, and then the desk being only 2 feet apart because of the increased volume in the number of students. In the cafeteria, this is a challenge we face with no matter what model we offer. In the plan, we articulated that we would use a combination approach of in-classroom, in the cafeteria, depending on logistics. It is our goal to obviously to try to do it in the best method that has the best mitigation results that we're looking for. But if we're in the cafeteria, you can look at the pink slips and can see the alternating staggered seating, trying to create 6 feet distancing as well as students not aligned with each other, facing each other. With a full opening, the challenge increases because we actually will have more supervision issues and a less likelihood of being able to spread out like this, or we will extend the lunch period significantly. Later, and you maybe see from some of the data from the principals, they literally may start lunch as early as 10 or 10:30 with a full opening. We specifically focus on social distancing, which is about limiting the spread between individuals. We did a side-by-side comparison of what happens in the scaffolding reopening and then the full reopening model. And again, clearly, we lose the ability to try to get the 6 feet or even 4 to 6 feet in the original plan. We lose the ability to alter our classrooms and the flexibility associated with it. And then we lose some of our control with regards to the amount of traffic that we have to manage when students change at the secondary level, even with a staggered approach to changing classes. Specifically, ask what are the challenges, and we summarize them here. 100% of the students for arrival and departure. So a large volume of students coming and going. At the high school, that's 2,300 students coming and going, for example. At Middle School East, over 1,000 students coming and going at the same time. The potential or increased volume of students in the hallways, we lose our open spaces and the ability to have social distancing We lose, as you saw, the ability to create physical distancing for students in smaller spaces. Lunches, all grade levels with physical distancing could span from approximately 10:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. We have the lack of available desks. We actually are also, if we have full reopening and try to move to a singular desk structure, we don't have enough desks. The custodial staff just recently informed us this past week. We could not do full reopening and have the plan focus on each student having an individual desk. That has been the priority of trying to use. We have more challenges with the plan to provide mask breaks and controlling the social distancing. We believe we absolutely, from what they just told me this week when they checked, we would lose some of our dedicated space for quarantine space. During the plan, we outlined one of the largest mitigation strategies that we were going to use, as recommended by one of the health organizations, in the absence of being able to do screening checks for every student each day, was to have immediately removal of students or staff demonstrating symptoms of COVID-19. Each school was in the process of designating a quarantine area. With full reopening, we lose access to much of that space to do that. Staff indicated larger groups in PE courses where social distancing can be difficult. We have less staff available for sub coverage. When we have someone out, we already had a substitute issue prior to COVID-19. We believe it will be more challenging. And quite honestly, we want to make sure that we have as many of our teachers here every day, because we believe that having subs in and out of our building more frequently actually adds to the mitigation challenges. Less flexibility with our paraprofessional support. We'd have larger groups for our chorus and music classes, which we're going to try to be downsized in this process. We have difficulty in creating the one-way traffic patterns that the principals are working on. We're going to lose storage space for the items that need to be removed. As you heard during the presentation, we brought in a number of unique instructional items that have to be removed from the classrooms now. With full reopening, we're actually losing some of those storage places for those things that we do want to keep for future use. Lunches then become spread out across the cafeteria, our auxiliary gym, the auditorium, to maintain social distancing, and at least 10 staff members pulled away for supporting students and to monitor areas. The middle school staff said that actually also could increase to as many as 25 staff, depending on the model, with full reopening that are needed to help with lunch service. We have lots of spaces to utilize if the need arises, again, to sanitize the classrooms. Part of also decreasing the number of students in the school was trying to also have classroom space that, should we have a positive case in a classroom and are directed to close that classroom down, we have more of a likelihood to have an available classroom to actually still have a class held while that classroom is being cleaned and sterilized. We lose that flexibility. As presented last night with the Mathematica, which was a Northeast Regional Educational Lab research study that was done and commissioned specifically by Pennsylvania Department of Ed for Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it said the safest approach to reopening is a hybrid model. That's a big part of why we led with that idea and that model. It says the surest way to slow down the disease is to reduce the number of contacts each child has in a day by organizing schools and classrooms so they are not all students all together. We try to do that and still meet the needs of our community. I'll be honest with you. We are struggling with what we're seeing now with regards to the spiking that's happening. The target for Berks County in the 14-day is supposed to be around 210. As of yesterday's update sent to the superintendents, our 14-day number is 263. And it has gone up for 4 or 5 consecutive days. The last line got a lot of people's attention, and then we're still working to try to address that situation to provide a better solution to our schools so that we can better meet and protect our students and our staff when we look at that last line from the study. The key components of the scaffolding plan that I just touched on a little bit was a reutilization of our buildings. Elementary schools are not your traditional elementary school configuration. Middle school really became more of an upper grade school for elementary level, and then to take all of our 7th through 9th and create what we would call a more of like a secondary school model. We believe that the 7th and 9th graders needed to have more in-person because of developmental needs, and that we had a better chance of being successful with our upper grades 10 through 12 with the 2-day model of in-person and in virtual. We also were trying to address the volume of students on buses each day because that is going to continue to be a challenge. Our goal is 48 students on a 72 passenger bus, who will be roughly 2 people to a seat. The 6 foot all across the state and the Commonwealth, we pretty much told the state, if you try to put 6 feet on the bus per student, you're only going to get about 12 students on the bus, and it's virtually impossible. And the legislators acknowledge that today. For the parents who are asking about special ed, IEP teams are working collaboratively with you directly to determine the most appropriate plan for the students. That is not something we will make a decision on as a broad generalization. It has to be driven by the IEP. If you have questions and concerns, you should contact the special ed department directly so they can talk to you specifically about your child's needs. The district is in the process of collaborating with BCTC to support the students who participate in those programs. It is a challenge for all 18 superintendents. The BCTC representative is also attending those meetings as we try to figure out how best to meet the needs of our students also. There's been a lot of conversation about the virtual learning program in the district. There has been a virtual learning team that has been trying to work on trying to develop a more robust K-12 virtual learning program within our school district. So that has not been something that we have not been working on, and a couple of people talked about that today. It had a focus on looking at research and trying to identify best practices, the key online lesson and component practices, student support, and also about sharing resources. We currently have Burke's online learning. So some parents did not know. We've had roughly 150 students enrolled in that program each year. It is in partnership with the Berks County Intermediate Unit. It is our current district cyber option, and it uses very similar platforms as many of the cyber schools in the state. It is, however, an asynchronous model. What is being worked on now is also having our own virtual learning option within our district that uses our own teachers. We've been looking at models such as the Phoenixville Area School District model, among others. It will include potentially a combination of synchronous, which is live, and asynchronous learning opportunities. We obviously have to partner with our education association that represents the teachers and get their support in implementing this model. We also recognize that we need to make some modifications to the upcoming school year calendar to allow time to build teacher capacity with new technology. Districts are not all in the same place. So often people ask why we can't do something, and we have to factor in where we are with resources and also staff capacity. We have a need for additional equipment and funding. It's a time-sensitive situation that the team has been working on over this past week, and identifying where to get that money. We also believe that we may need to spend money to ultimately save money, and also, most importantly, create a better health and safety plan going forward. We talk about the school calendar. We're talking about a potential start on or about August 31st compared to August 24th. The plan would not be looking to extend the school year, but to buy additional time for our teachers to build their capacity with whatever new technology we bring in that would allow them to actually live stream their instruction from their classroom. Again, the need for additional equipment and funding. We believe that we need to have more time for our teachers before the start of the year to have them go through their normal teaching and learning routines at the beginning of the year, but we also now need to build in time to let them go over their safety and mitigation strategies that we're putting in place. For many of them, they'll either be in a new building in the hybrid plan, and what we're asking them to do would be very different than what they're used to doing on a normal basis. We have to build in routines and practices that support, like I said, mask breaks, traffic movement in the building, hygiene strategies that they're going to use. We also believe we need to do this because of the potential impact of loss of students to cyber and private schools. The Hanover survey feedback showed that there was 41% of the people who strongly opposed or somewhat opposed changing the calendar. That was 25% of it was strongly. But 59% neither support nor oppose, somewhat supported or strongly supported as a reference point. We do believe that when you look at what was then and what was now, we would hope and think that our teachers and our parents would be supportive of the fact that if we build in time to prepare them to meet the needs of our children with much more virtual options, we also believe that they would be supportive of the fact that we need to be prepared for if we go into red phase, that could happen. When we talk about the impact of our student enrollment potential decline with cyber charter, there are 14 cyber schools currently operating in Pennsylvania. Many times their curriculum do not align with individual school districts, so students would be often going to a totally different curriculum. So I would tell parents to make sure they are well aware of what type of quality teaching and learning program they're going to. But I also know that one of the biggest priorities, no matter what, based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is going to be safety first. The primary funding for school is by school districts. The district residents pays the tuition. The average regular education cyber charter tuition rate is $12,500. That's the average. It goes up to sometimes 20-something thousand for a regular student. The average for a special ed student billed to the district is $27,000. That also has gone up to $50,000 on the top end, billed to school districts. We receive no state or federal reimbursement, so you don't get any new money to support that. It comes out of already your allocation that you have at your local level. It is predominantly funded by local taxpayers. The charter school costs for districts often increase on an annual basis, even if the school enrollment remains flat in a district. For most school districts, when a student enrolls in a cyber charter school, there's no reduction in cost equal to what they pay in a cyber charter tuition. So we end up having to still maintaining the cost to fund our own program, or we end up having to cut often your own programs to offset the loss of funds. Parents have asked, what's the plan for if something happens with a positive case? Parents will be receiving this communication directly from the school district. This was a protocol that came through the BCIU and went through in collaboration with the 18 superintendents. It was developed by CHOP, Children's Hospital, and this would be the process based on COVID-19 symptoms. If there's a positive COVID-19 PCR test with symptoms, if there's a positive COVID-19 test without symptoms, then close contact with symptoms, and then close contact of COVID-19 without symptoms that the schools will be following. The state has outlined also process and procedures. There are times that the school district may find out about a positive case through Department of Health. Department of Health is supposed to notify the school district. The DOH staff are directed to assist the school with a risk assessment, talk conversation about isolation and the quarantine recommendations and other infection control recommendations. If we have an identified case, 90% of the parents said they want to know about it in that survey that we got. It is important for parents to know that we will notify, as we did in the spring when we had a couple incidences, but we do not, by law, identify the individual. So parents will not be allowed to be told who it is. If we end up with either detecting a case or being contacted directly and it didn't go through DOH, the protocol is that we are to contact DOH. One of the things that the board approved that we did was we brought back all of our nurses up under our control, and you also designated one nurse to serve as a coordinator. All of these processes and procedures are part of why we asked for those changes in our healthcare structure within our school district. We're trying to have a single point of contact to help support with the conversations with other health organizations and officials. If the person is present in our school property, the person will be immediately removed, as you saw in the process in the previous screen. We are, as you saw and heard, developing isolation rooms. So for instance, if a student could not leave immediately with parent pickup, we obviously need to remove them from the population with other students and isolate them until we can get them home. Please note that one of the changes with full reopen is that we would have limited space to do that. The default from DOH is that an entire building does not need to be evacuated. There are only certain circumstances, and they would tell us whether we'd have to do that. They also talked to us about waiting 24 hours before cleaning and disinfecting. We're to close off the areas that are used by the person who's impacted and follow the cleaning guidelines from CDC. And then, of course, our communication system, which will run through our communications and marketing specialists. That is really the answer why we can't do full opening. And honestly, with what's happening now, we believe that we need to continue to even drill down deeper with our own hybrid plan and try to make it even safer, which may require us to, again, in the absence of people resources, as we talked about, we've been expediting now our work to try to identify a plan with regards to more virtual options so that parents have choices. We also want to make sure that we have opportunities for students who may be directed to be excluded from school to have an opportunity to still receive their instruction from home. I'll pause right there and see if there are any questions. Madam Chair.
All right. I guess we can start the questionings. If anybody has a question, if they could raise their hand. I see Mrs. Denon and Ms. Nyman. Let me just switch over here. Mrs. Denon, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bedin, for going back and taking the time to explain to everyone on the board the different options and why the full opening at this point is not going to be feasible. So I just have two questions. In reading through a lot of things about with other schools and different things that people are doing, I think you actually answered one, because my one question was, why can't we do what other schools are doing with the instructor-led virtual training? And I just want to make sure that I heard this correctly, that number one, we are working with other school districts to try to do that. And number two, part of the challenges with that is we do not have all of the equipment in place. Is that the correct? Are those the issues that we have with that?
Go ahead. I thought you were finished with your question. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was my first question. Was that the issues that we have with that synchronous learning? Because that's what everybody keeps talking about, and that's where everyone says, well, we're going to go to outside cybers because they have that teacher-led instruction.
So first, let me apologize that as we had to make shift and move because of the power outage at Ed Center, that I didn't realize that the makeshift setup, the monitors per flip that we're showing. So I apologize to the audience. That presentation is online and available to the public view for those who I hear the screen was blind partially. They were flipped the way they were supposed to be showing. The answer to your question is we've had a team working on it. The answer to the question is that we've tried to find the most efficient and effective way to continue to make our teachers be the teacher of record teaching our children in the model that we're looking at. Whether it be that we bring something in like Ingenuity and they still use that to teach, or whether they just teach and we stream. Like I said, Phoenixville was one example that we looked at. There are other districts that we've been looking at. What has been identified, and it's on the agenda next, is that we still have an outstanding level of students we have to buy their one-to-one devices also, for example. And that's part of the next discussion. That's one thing. Two is the team has been spending time trying to understand, again, trying to be effective and efficient with the taxpayers' dollars. What do we have right now that already works versus just running out and buying something new? So that has taken time. Just like they've gone out physically and sat in the desk and did all that stuff, those pictures, that was them running around trying to see what does this really look like. They've also been running around checking with our laptops, how do they communicate? Could a student actually see what is being done in the classroom? Like, does our devices connect into our smart boards? When the teacher writes on it, would it show on the student screen? With everything focused about it still being our own teacher of record. The other pieces of that obviously is having to work from the legal aspect, which is some point working with Mr. Soltank and his firm to make sure the nuances of your streaming live, and it can be done, obviously people are doing it, but to make sure that we're in the right place that is defensible for our district based on his recommendation, that when we're doing that and people making sure that we believe isolate the teacher as a focus so other children aren't being exposed to the viewing of it in an open forum, those types of things. Right now, I will tell you this past week, amongst trying to figure out full open plan, and Bob Ionelli is here and he may jump in. If Bob Ionelli had hair, it would be gone. We didn't have to worry about that. I mean, he doesn't have any hair right now. So, but he sat in Monday's meeting and said he's worried, scared, because it also requires ordering, time to get equipment in, time to set it up. And honestly, we've got to make a decision. We're out of time with research. We've got to make a decision of which model we're going to, and we really believe that we're trying to figure out how do we just make it so that the teacher can be the teacher, our own teacher, instructing in her class, and do it in a manner that if Dana Bedden could not come to school that day, I could still log on and see my teacher. If it was my science teacher third period, I just participate, science teacher in third period. We do have equipment limitations and challenges. Right off the bat, I think it's sent to you all. I'm doing it from memory, just to get other low-grade devices. It was like $260,000 to $300,000, I believe, for that one. We're potentially talking about $300,000 that may occur with regards to the need for equipment to actually do streaming to our students if they're home.
Okay. The second question I had was, I see that you had said that we're going to, one of your recommendations is to delay the start of school till August 31st. Are there any challenges or issues why, if we needed to, in order to get some of this equipment in and meet the guidelines, could we have a delayed opening, maybe like even 2 weeks after that, if we find that we're just not really ready? Because I personally would rather see us, I would rather see us delay an opening, get everything up and running, and have the best opportunity to go into the school year with keeping the kids there as much as possible, with the understanding that the more time we have to do this, the more time we will have if we go into the yellow phase. And I know none of us have a crystal ball, but like you, I monitor the data every day. And I do not, I believe that if things start going south and the numbers increase, we will not have a choice. The choice will be made for us. And I know that they're talking about letting local school districts make their own choice, but we saw what happened last time. So I think that we need to kind of learn from that lesson and say, okay, this could happen again. So let's just make sure that we have everything in place, which is why I was really supportive. I really liked the idea of the plan that you presented, because it was the best option to go into that if we have to go into the yellow phase, and we can go, it seems like the plan, we can go back and forth with it. So those are my two only comments. And you know, I'm a little disappointed that, you know, you did have to take some crucial time away to show the board the full opening and why it really wouldn't work, but I understand, and it's fine.
There was a lot of conversation among the team about, am I still broadcasting? Something's going on weird on my screen. Okay. Mike, can you look at this one? The staff talked a little bit about that, and I just told them I was more comfortable right now, starting with the focus on the week, because again, we want to get our students back as soon as possible. And that's why you see on or about right now, because our focus right now is Ms. Lionelli is concerned about delivery turnaround time, period. And honestly, if it's going to be delayed, it's going to be delayed more than just August. So.
But we have that, my question was, we have that flexibility. That was my question.
Do we have the flexibility, you mean as far as delaying a
week?
I do feel comfortable. We think we can make that work for sure.
So there's
if we go
nothing
longer than that, we risk, I think, having challenges with still meeting the calendar requirement without extending a year.
That was
our first priority. Was we believe that we could potentially not have to extend a year with a week for sure. Anything more than that, we have to do more deep dive, and it would depend on how we could design our virtual aspect to make up the hours.
Okay.
That's the only way we'd be able to do it without having to extend a year. But within a week, we believe, between looking at already flexible instructional days that the state provides, to looking at a couple tweaking of some of the holidays that we have in the calendar, we feel comfortable. So what that would do is give 7 to 8 days specific without students here for staff to actually do the things like safe schools training, which has modules in there that HR is rolling out that our staff needs to be trained with. Again, the mitigation strategies and routines that the principals be working on with their staff. And again, the conversation with the principals, they all universally said this would be hugely helpful for them and the staff to familiar, especially since we're sending staff to different buildings. I mean, you got, 5th elementary teachers who are going to move from the elementary building to be working with 5th graders, for example, in their middle school. They need to have time to adjust and become familiar. And then if we get the new equipment, Mr. Einelli says, we're going to need time to make sure they know how to actually use it to its fullest.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Nyman, are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, just one moment. I have Mr. Foose in the queue, and after him, Mr. Brophy.
Okay, one concern is how are we going to make up those days if we start later?
It's
hard to hear.
Okay, a week we believe we're comfortable that we don't have to extend a year.
Okay, so a week we can make up.
We believe we can do that. If we go longer than that, we have grave concerns that we have to drill deeper. So I'm not comfortable saying to the board, we wouldn't extend a year with more than a week. With a week, we just looking what we were able to figure out, we feel comfortable that we can make it work.
Okay, that was one of my issues. I don't want to see the students lose any of that time. That's earth-shattering to me because it's all about education. With your new configuration, going the plan that you want to do, the scaffolding one, okay, you might have less students. Oh God, I hear feedback. You might have less students going to that school, but we're not going to have any more teachers in the school, correct? So we're still going to have the same number of students in a room. So if we were scheduled to have 25 students in a room, we're still going to have those 25 students in a room.
Yes, which is also one of the reasons we believe that we need to have this more robust model also.
But
So,
how are we going to, with the new configuration then, how are we going to still maintain that, that 6 foot distance since we're not reducing the class size?
there is, as most school districts said, there is no way that we can get 6 foot distance in a classroom. It's literally impossible, because when you take a 990 or whatever the square feetage is to get 6 feet, and I don't know if Charlie's on here, it was what, maybe 12 or 13 kids in a classroom? We've been clear with them. I mean, what they're asking with that standard is just totally impossible. And one of the things we said to the legislators is, for us to do that, we absolutely need resources for more staff. So what we figured, that's how we came to the 4 to 6 foot, that our staff said that they could still function and get the social distancing of 4 to 6 feet until this mandate changed. And I'm sure that's why PDE put to the extent feasible. Our staff was told, start with 6 feet, but go no lower than 4 feet.
So if we even went to the full day school,
it would be even closer and less. We would
how could it be closer? Because the elementaries, we're still going to have like first grade. If you have 2 first grade classrooms and there's 25 in each classroom, you're still going to have those there.
But we're saying that teachers have the ability to have more spaces where they can move kids around to larger spaces when they can't have a choice. You lose that, as one of the things said, that so if I wanted to teach in another room that was bigger, the principal has now the luxury to take that class and put them in a bigger room.
How many of our rooms are bigger?
That depends on the building. They have some, depends on the building. Will we be able to do that universally across the board? No, but we know for a fact that if you have every school coming, they don't even have that option.
But if
Part of one of the mitigation strategies is to try to do instruction also in other spaces for larger. So for example, I know one district is actually using their auditorium and trying to actually partition it off.
Okay, say we just use Cobradale School and say this room's bigger, but we're going to use that for a class that has 26 kids rather than 23 because it's a little bit bigger, so we have 3 more students in there. Can't we still move them around under the full day or all the kids going back?
But what you just described, but would that classroom even be available? Some classes are in our buildings, all our classrooms aren't the same size. That's one thing that Mr. Drescher has found. So he also has the ability to move around classes also better within the building. The principal does.
So that's what I'm saying. So we have this class that has 26 in, we can put them in that larger room and use a smaller room for.
Yes, you could, but you still also have the issue of transition time. You also have the issue of feeding time. All those other mitigation strategies are lost also. You're focusing on one aspect,
right?
Just the classroom. We're asking you to look at the total concept of a building that is now at 90-something% usage. Just simple math. That doesn't mean that you have less space to spread out.
May I just interrupt for a sec? So in the scaffolded plan, we have K through 4 in the elementary schools. And in a full reopen, I apologize for the feedback. In a full reopen, we would have K through 5, and that's a big difference space-wise.
I don't see that there's going to be that significant of a difference.
But you're focusing just on the classroom. It's the other piece of the whole utilization of the building. You're making a focus on one item and disregarding all the other issues that come with putting a large volume of people into the building.
If I can,
we're not saying that we can meet every piece of this, but if we go your way, we lose all those other mitigation opportunities also.
if I can add, Mrs. Nyman, what we were planning with the scaffolded approach was that with these larger classes, we were going to have space within the building to where after a group was with the teacher, part of the students can go into another area with a paraprofessional, with another support, and be practicing something that they've learned, so that we wouldn't be trying to have 25 in a class if we had that large of a class. We also were looking at using space like the library. If we had a few classes that were that large, depending on what the library space or the art room space, or even taking the cafeteria or the gym and dividing it up and being able to separate the students so that we were getting closer to that 6-foot social distancing. Those were also things that we were going to do with having that additional space or fewer students within a building, because then there would be, you know, just a little bit more flexibility for us. So that was part of the plan. Knowing that we had those kids or those classrooms where we did have larger class sizes, we wanted to make sure that we were trying to make sure that those students weren't sitting in a classroom all day together, that we were separating them.
But we also took 6th grade out, so we have all those rooms. Now, it might only be 2 rooms in some school, other schools it might be 3. So we still have those rooms available also. So there are,
I don't want to say we do have those rooms, because they have been repurposed for other things, with regard to special education classrooms, speech rooms, etc., because a lot of that stuff still has to go on and we still have to provide for social distancing there. But you are correct, you know, like a school like New Hanover, we have a bit more space there. Now, we also know our class sizes are higher at New Hanover, so we're going to need to be spreading those kids out, and we'll need that extra space to be able to do so.
okay, and then my major concern is now you're going to be putting 7th through 12th at the high school. Okay, alternating days, I understand that. But now you're going to have 6 grades in there, and you're not going to know if somebody comes out with COVID right away where it came from. I mean, because you're not going to know. You're going to have 7th through 10th, no, 7th, 8th, 9th, 3 days, and 10th through 12th, the other 2 days. You're putting it out there that COVID can be picked up by any of them anytime and taken home.
Yes, but I'm not following you. What you're saying, so we're grouping 7, 8, 9 together, 10 through 12. And again, taking a building and going from 2,300 students in the building to about 1,500 or 1,600 at one time.
But we have great custodians. I know that. But for some unknown reason, one day it's not cleaned like it should be, and somebody comes in there, and now it's spread.
But
and we're not going to know essentially where it.
But that can happen no matter what.
I understand that. But now we're putting 6th grades at that risk.
No, 6th grade would go to school in the same building, in the middle school, 2 grades only. Just as if the same thing could happen if we kept them in.
That's right. But now, instead of having K through 5 and 6th, 7th, 8th at middle school, now you're going to have, and 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th at high school. Now you're putting 2 more grades into the high school.
But they're not coming the same day.
They're not, but you still have the germs that can be there.
But the germs are driven by, but decreasing the population also helps decrease the likelihood of the spread of germs.
But you're still going to have how many students there?
1,500 on a day, less than 2,300, 15 to 1,600.
And 15 to 1,600 on this day, and then 15 to 1,600 on the next day. It's just, it's mind-boggling to me.
Any blended model or hybrid model.
It's mind-boggling. And I do understand there are several schools out there who had, and I understand we were in a time crunch from March till we shut down until the end of the school year. But the education that a lot of students received, I don't know where we're going to make up that time. I'm very concerned on that. Very concerned. I've talked to several people, and they don't wish any of us to be in our position, because to them, education's a lot too. And in 2-3 years, when COVID's over and done with, And then they're going to come back to us and say, now we want our education back. And how are we going to be able to bring all of our students back up to that education again? It's a never ending, a no win-win situation regardless of what we do.
That is correct. And that's why we also in the presentation shared that it's pretty much trying to have the lesser of the bad choices and still have some sort of education going on in the safest manner. But I will say to you though, that sending everybody together every day, and we are even concerned now that if the numbers keep going up, we may have to back off the everyday opportunity for elementary. But that was trying to hold on to it with, again, the economic situation and the childcare that has been also part of the conversation when parents can't go to work.
All right, are we ready to move on to the next question? So I have Brandon's up next, then Mr. Brophy, Ms. Hogan, and Mr. Hemingway.
I'm trying to put my hand up, I can't.
Oh, and Ruth.
Sorry.
Mrs. Deeroff and Mr. Updegrove. And then myself. All right, so Brandon, go ahead.
And thank you for going through that presentation. A couple of things jump out at me, and first is just obviously this is very difficult to try to plan for. That being said, I do think we don't want to rush into anything, but we do need to give some clear direction to not just staff so that they are able to really get to work on these things in a real effective way, but also for parents. I mean, we've had a lot of parents reach out to us that basically express their frustration and in that frustration have told us directly that they're looking outside the district. And that is a shame, because I think that we really, I think that the staff is demonstrating that they're putting a lot of thought into this, and they do, provide a really great education here at Boyertown. So I'd like us to try to get our direction set so that people are able to start making their personal decisions, and so that the staff really has the requisite amount of time to put the best foot forward for these plans. So the questions that I have immediately for this are, first, what type of maintenance or review have we been doing with our HVAC and airflow? I know that the start of school, it's usually a bit warmer. So we can't just expect to be able to use outdoor spaces and open windows, because we can't control day-to-day the weather. But how much of that has been taken into consideration? And then I have another question about the technology aspect, but I was wondering if we could just touch on the airflow in the building first. Buildings, sorry.
Everyone, can I just jump in here?
Yes, go ahead, Charlie.
Okay. What we've done so far to date is we've changed all the filters, obviously. We've looked at every unit to make sure the units are running correctly and not giving us any problems. We're still in the middle of it. I wouldn't say the middle, but towards the end of it. I do meet with the BCIU directors and supervisors from that county, Berks County, and there's a lot of discussion about this, all different types of ways you can change the systems. But the reality is, if we get fresh air in the building after everybody's gone, and we can do that by opening the air dampers 100% as opposed to 10%, that's going to be our best way to get fresh air in the building. If we start allowing high humidity air into the building and super chilling it, because now the chiller plants are going to want to super chill because there's heat in the building. That's going to be another problem. That's going to be a mold issue. So we don't want to do that. Other than that, there's no miracle here that's going to make the airflow any better than what we currently have. Changing filters is probably our highest priority at this point, and there's mixed responses when it comes to the intervals in that. And we've talked to Train, we've talked to York, we've talked to all the big manufacturers who make these plants, and their recommendation is to basically look at these units and it's an as-needed basis. Some of them will need changes sooner than others.
Okay,
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I know that they're typically on a maintenance schedule, but I would obviously, if there's any question at this point, I think erring on the side of caution, making sure that we have the most recent filters put in there would certainly provide the best environment for the current situation. But it sounds like that's being taken a look at. So.
Yeah, and if I could add one other thing that I got out of the group from the BCIU was a recommendation for the bathrooms, specifically the gang bathrooms, to leave those fans, those exhaust fans that take air out of the building on 24/7, not to shut them off until this is over. And so that's going to require a little bit of maintenance in that these motors, you know, given the age of some of them, they're highly likely to burn up. So it's just one of those things that we have to stay on top of it and monitor it. And when it needs attention, we need to give it attention.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I guess along the lines of the buildings themselves, I was wondering if we had looked at, right now we're the different days that we have for the 7, 8, 9, and 10, 11, 12, they're alternating. Had we considered doing, and forgive me if this was touched on and I missed it, doing consecutive days and then switching so that it's the same group of people that are then getting that deep clean, and we know that it's the same group. We're able to, if there is an incident, we're able to trace that or manage the quarantining of a particular group rather than have two different groups impacted.
Ms. Torship, do you think you can answer that?
That is something that we certainly can take under consideration. There are a lot of plans that are becoming public, and there have been a lot of professionals that have reached out to us that have been working with their school districts. So we are, you know, open to making adjustments to make sure that we are putting together the most effective and beneficial health and safety plan for all of our students. So the long way of answering your question is yes, we can certainly, you know, look at that and see how that would work here.
And the last question I have is around the potential for the synchronous learning. I think that the scaffold approach provides some flexibility. The synchronous learning can really provide a great deal of additional flexibility for families and for staff. And it would be a great addition to have. But I know that when we had to make the rapid transition last spring, that we surveyed the student population and the families and found that there were a number that struggled with their internet connection. The foundation does a great job of providing us with additional resources. Have we talked to them about possibly diverting, or, you know, for a year, we might not need some of the Osmos or some of the other things that are in the rooms so much as we might need to ensure that students at home, if they need to be at home to do some of this, have secure and reliable internet access.
Mr. Foose, we have looked at some options with respect to that. When we were closed in March, the local cable companies and internet providers were inundated with requests, and we were exploring some options, but our time was a little limited. It is a consideration with respect to, where we are. I do want to make a point that goes back to, something Mrs. Nyman had said a little bit earlier, something that's going to be a lot different in this process that we really need to take into consideration is the fact that when we were closed on March 12th, we had 2 hours of time to really even plan for it. Our teachers didn't even have access to their resources in their classroom. So I just wanted to make sure that point was made available by allowing this time for our teachers to have that potential extra week for planning. They will have access to materials and access to all of those abilities to answer some of the questions that have been put out there. So I wanted to make sure that point was put across because it hasn't been something that we've really touched on. And I think it's overlooked sometimes that when we evaluated the quality of instruction that happened from April on, our teachers really didn't have access to resources that they will readily have access to right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. As far as I know that they were offering a lot of different deals and giveaways and things like that in the spring that I imagine that may not be available at the same rates in the fall because there's very large opportunity for them to gain a whole lot of customers. However, have we maybe considered partnering with some of the neighboring districts, do some type of technology consortium to try to get better rates on providing those things to students? Just something to consider. I don't necessarily need an answer to that right now because it would require additional work anyway.
Well, thank you for the idea, Mr. Foose. We did see some, I don't want to be quoted on this, but I thought I did see some communication out from one of the local providers that was like keeping the same cost for internet service through the end of the year, but we will definitely follow up on that.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Brophy, you are next, and Ms. Hogan, you are after him.
Dr. Ben, last week you presented to us, Mike, can you hear me on this? Yeah, you presented to us a plan, a scaffolding plan. And I mean, the plan checked all the boxes for letting us go back to school. So that's nothing for me to question. Same as this one does. What we asked from you at that point in time was to show us what a plan would be like if we went back to full-time school. Reason we're asking for that is just how much safer it would be. So in deference to a board member's comment here, this is a waste of time. I think maybe now I can ask you a question a little bit better on that. Being that we're still going to have a lot of kids in the classes, we still have all the transition times between rooms, we still have the same bathroom uses, we still have the same bus uses. In your opinion, just how much safer is this plan than the going back to school plan? It's overall, I mean, I see some safety out of it, but I don't see a whole lot. And from what I see from the parents' questions, I don't believe that's going to meet what they're asking us to do. And I don't think we can meet what they're asking us to do, to be honest with you. But I need to know from your side, where are we going to go with this? I mean, I understand, but we're not going to be able to please everyone. So how much safer do you believe this is?
I don't know how you quantify how much. I'm going to tell you that every research study we have said, going back to school full time is the least safest. That's not just Dana Benton. That's Mathematica, that's CDC, all of them. The smaller the number of kids, so you said we're going to have changing classes. Yes, but we're going to have fewer kids changing classes.
70%.
Again, no, that's not true, because remember, you forget the other mitigation strategies we showed in the presentation.
Okay,
so you
so cut it
looking at
down
the
somewhere.
aggregate and not the breakdown of the processes with those students. So for example, we talked about staggered dismissal. Fewer students and staggered dismissal actually increases the mitigation process. you have the ability to have fewer kids trying to feed and serve. When you put all the students, for example, back in high school, we've run out of options on how to do that. And we're literally going to be serving, as a person say, he says, no idea how you're going to serve lunch in the time frame that all the students in the building. It helps with that situation. You also have fewer students at the 7 through 12 level that are going to school every day. So that means potentially fewer students on the bus. So it is not the same. But if you put full open, all of them are riding the bus unless the parents take them off, but we have to assume the normal ridership. Then we've said all of them are going to be on the bus, and chances are she's going to have less likelihood of being able to go to a seat. All those, and I don't know how else to answer it, the staff put the list together. It was on the screen. It is safer, not just Dana Bedden, but fewer students. And just said to you tonight that with the numbers going up, because remember, this was developed when we also were in a better place. We're going back to a more difficult place. So we're concerned that even trying to address the childcare issue is going to be a challenge, and we may need to back out of that and decrease those days for elementary potentially. But the bigger mitigation opportunity that we see also is offering the virtual option to do that, but use our own teachers. We've been working on that, trying to figure out how to add that piece in there, because that may decrease the number of students who are actually going to school every day. Because we know there's a facet of parents. We talked about it early in the presentation when we did the survey results. 28% say they were interested in full virtual. So we've been working, trying to figure out what does that look like, how many of them really are committed to it, and how many numbers that would take out of the population.
And if you went to the streaming plan, that would affect that also, those numbers, which is good.
Right.
So
It also allows us to still address instructional equity piece also, because again, there are students in times that we may have to say based on our protocol, I'm going to physically say to you, you have to be home because of X number of days. But if I can say you're going to be home and still have access to education streaming, I've also still tried to find a way to support the student learning without it being something different or new. So we believe adding this component as an additional choice that may decrease the numbers, but it also helps us with also us effectively applying our mitigation strategies of exclusion with minimizing the educational impact or loss of education, which is one of the pieces that we keep trying to see how we can hold on to at the same time. And remember, we also tried to address the social emotional aspect of, again, American Academy of Pediatrics. And, you know, the social piece of it, either it won't look the same and it's going to be very restrictive, because it is. I mean, I was honest, we feel like we're going backwards in time and how we have to create a classroom. I mean, it's, personally, I'm distraught about it. Because at the end of the day, we're going to ask kids to sit and kind of be, for lack of a better term, in this little space. But we also know that nothing's better than a real teacher teaching them also. So we're trying to find that compromise that, okay, we got to change how it looks, but I also want the person who's trained to teach you to try to teach you also, and get some type of relationship with that, and get to a place where our teachers have more control over teaching a lesson. Again, to Mr. Stout's point of more planning and preparation time versus what happened to us in March. Even though I'm still, as I said to them Sunday when we talked, I'm concerned if they pull the red before we get to where we need to be. Now, today we said that's a rumor. It's not happening in our meeting with the legislators, but
I believe that's going to be
things
closer
keep
to that than
changing.
you think.
Mr. Brophy, let me speak to a point just to give you some quantifiable.
No, first thing, thank you for one thing. We've got two things to look at now, which is what I as a board member look for. I don't look for one thing and then say, okay, that's good or bad, because you gave me a yes or no answer for kids going back to school on a plan. So now you've given me a second plan, or at least an outline of a plan. It gives me more background and detail that I can go think about, rather than just say yes. So that, I thank you for that.
Okay.
And that's what I think we should be doing. Not just saying, okay, that's a great plan and there's nothing else. So that is why we were asking that, that's why I was asking that question last week. And I will continue to challenge the administration on different things like this, because my game plan is to get you guys to get to the right answer. And I can do that by making you continue to dig down till you get to that information. And I didn't feel you were there last week. So anyways, Mr. Stout,
So-
thank you very much. What is
Mr.
So
Stout,
let me-
but I don't want us to leave, but we haven't given another plan. Part of what we said is, we can't do a full open plan,
But you
but I
gave
gave
us-
you a response, if that's what you wanted to, what the challenge are.
Yeah,
Okay,
in
all
my
right.
letter to you, I asked you if you couldn't give a plan, which it sounded like
Yes,
you couldn't.
okay, yeah.
Could you give me the reasons why we couldn't
Yes,
do it?
I
And
agree
you
with
did
that, yes.
I mean, you answered my letter fine. That's
Okay,
I have no
yep,
problem.
I agree with that, yes.
Okay, Mr. Stout.
So just to give you some quantifiable information with respect to your question, if we look at the space that would now be provided within our elementary schools by having 5th grade move out, and I'm giving you a ballpark number.
That's fine.
If our 2 small buildings allowed 2 new classrooms, they would have 2 spaces available, and the 4 big buildings would free up 4 classrooms. That's 20 classrooms across the district at the elementary school level that provide space. And if you multiply that times 20, 25 students, you are now freeing up opportunities for space for upwards to 400 to 500 students. So if you want to talk about how we could potentially provide more safety for our students, just by the mere freeing up of that space and be able to move kids and have more flexibility provides that opportunity at the elementary school on a quantifiable level.
So what I'm taking from that is we've already used up all our space. We've already looked at our gymnasiums and decided that we could maybe put cubicle type things in there like office. And we looked at that. Have we looked at, is there buildings we can rent to move kids into? I'm just saying, these are examples of what I think when I say we looked at mitigation strategies. Have we looked at mobile classrooms? They might not be a real possibility, but the question I need to hear is, did we look at it? The other thing is on the bus transitions. Have we asked the parents that maybe some on a rotating basis will be willing to drive their kids in to try and, lighten up the bus load? I see when you tell me the things, there was no information to tell me you looked at any of that. And I really don't see that yet, but at least I have the confidence you've looked at a lot of different things. But there are some things, they're just examples I'm throwing out. I'm not by no means telling you to do it, but they're just examples of things I would look for that you've done.
And to your point, Mr. Brophy, one of the things that threw the administrative team for a loop based upon the last meeting was to kind of go back to a square one. And we have created a survey that we were ready to blast out last week, but we wanted to try to get some more guidance because putting a survey out there and not knowing exactly where we were going to go could be misleading. So we wanted to make sure we had data points with respect to the attendance for students about what parents would be willing to do, with respect to transportation about what they'd be willing to do. And we also were going to provide information about, do you have technology and the use of technology, to Mr. Foos's point. So that was all something we wanted to hold off because we didn't want to throw something out there to our parents across the district and then be misleading based upon what was going to be undertaken by the board decisions as to where we were going to go.
Okay, so something I'd like to see the administration get out to the people. Last week was the first time we saw any plans really and had it explained to us. That is our working session. That is when we sit down and discuss what can and when cannot be. We don't vote. There were no votes taken. But from the letters that I've gotten in there, the phone calls I've gotten, and everything else, there's a misconception out there in the public that that was a voting meeting. So I need the administration to tell the people that when we have those sessions, that is a working session. That is where we're trying to come to a conclusion. And I think we need to tell some of the board members the same thing. It is not an end all. It is a discussion time. And that's not what happened. And that's not the perception everybody got. And if I sound a little angry about that, it's because I am. We're supposed to be working together to get to the best resolution. If we don't talk and discuss them to come up and challenge the general thinking, we're never going to get anywhere. So I would like that somehow we get to the public that those committee meetings are in effect working sessions for the board, because we don't have any other time we do it. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm concerned because I believe that we worked very hard. I sent out a complete timeline of what we were thinking, trying to get up to July 28th. And no response feedback. there were at least 2 communications that had a request to respond with some questions, comments, concerns, or thoughts by that Monday of that next week. I got 1 question from Ms. Hogan, and Ms. McWhorter, you sent something, but nothing about any concern about the direction we were having. You're absolutely right, those are work sessions. But you can't have a work session if you don't know what you're coming to work for, or if there's questions or concerns. So I believe that what was said is we can't, if we don't get feedback or questions, to know that these are the questions. Until we showed up that day, from the time of June 8th of starting the work, and it even sent a complete schedule of what it would look like to the board. Nothing said about, I want to also see what it would look like with a full open, until that night. So what was just described makes it very difficult to do if no plans or questions or dialogue to say, come to this meeting to share this with us. So in essence, that was the first time we heard it.
Okay, can I comment real quick? First of all, I don't want to get into an argument back and forth here. We're supposed to be working together, and that's not where this is going to go. But when you only get 1 or 2 questions back, that should be a red flag that people don't understand what they're supposed to be doing. Now, I think this board wants to get more involved into what you do, not to hinder you, but to help you. And that's where I'd like to go, and that's where I think this board wants to go. And I'm not sure we all understand that. So I think we have a communications problem that maybe we have to fix. And that's all I'm saying at this point. We've gotten here because we're not communicating properly, and I think we got to work on that. And I don't know what that answer is. I'll take it up to
All right.
board leadership.
We
Take
will,
care.
we can move on now to the next. Who is Miss Hogan?
Thank you, Mrs. McWhorter. So first, I'd like to commend the administration and the pandemic team for all of their hard work and for what they presented tonight. It was very much appreciated. I think they made it clear that a full reopen would not be safe, and it is just not the path that we should take. I agree with Mr. Foose when he said that we need to give clear direction to the staff and parents. So I think that's really something that we should be working towards, as he said, getting our direction set. I do remain concerned about the ability to clean the buses in between runs, but I also understand that from a financial standpoint, we're doing the best we can there. I do want to ask, and I believe I already know the answer, but I want to ask anyway. So if, let's say I, as a parent, decide that, you send out a survey and you ask me, are you going to put your child on the bus? And I say, no, I'm going to choose to drive my child. If in a month I change my mind, then that seat still belongs to my child, correct? You can't bar me from changing my mind, for lack of a better term. I'm sorry.
As I understand it, and Mr. Sultana can correct me, that if they change their mind, they have a right to get on the bus. Because one of the things that we're saying, that when we were talking about drilling down farther, and then Hanover Research even agreed that at this point, rather than reissuing the other one because the circumstances have changed, that we should go ahead and focus on drilling down to the question like that, which was about transportation. The other thing we were going to drill down on is that 28% that Mr. Eichstadt actually talked about, of wanting to drill down and get an understanding of how many really are committed to wanting to have a full virtual option. A student that could actually change their mind, and we could not stop them from getting on the bus.
I appreciate that answer. So then likewise, if, just for example, if I were to enroll my child either in a cyber charter or the online cyber through Boyertown, or if we end up with a synchronous learning option. And I decide that that no longer serves my need or purpose, or it's just not working out. Can you bar my child from coming back into the brick and mortar if we are offering that option to other students?
If they are a resident of our district and properly enrolled and meet the standard, we have to provide a free and appropriate education to them.
Okay, I appreciate that answer as well.
And let me be clear too, and if Mr. Sultanic disagrees, let me be clear on the transportation. Let me back up and start with. If we're giving it to other students, whatever way we're giving it, we have to give the same to that same student. So my point is, because transportation is not a requirement except for certain specified things. So let me be clear about that, that if we're doing it for one student and they don't fall in that unique category, we have to offer the same to all students that are entitled to it. So the student will be able to come back unless we change our whole model and said, oh, we're not giving transportation at all. So I just want to be clear about that.
Okay, I appreciate that clarity. I am absolutely in favor of the district developing a synchronous learning option that as a third option. I think parents are asking for that, and I think it's something that we have a responsibility to really look into. And then I also just wanted to say that I am also in favor of allowing that extra week for planning for teachers and staff members and administrators. I think that's going to be very important. And, as we go forward, education is absolutely important. I think we all sit on this board because we agree that education is important, but safety is also extremely important. And as you talked about Maslow's hierarchy, you can't learn if you're not safe. I agree with that. So that concludes my comments. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Mr. Hemingway, you're up next. I have Ms. Dierolf after Mr. Hemingway. So Mr. Hemingway, Ms. Dierolf, Mr. Updegrove, and then myself.
Is mic on? Your mic's not on, Mr. Henry. Is it plugged in on the side all the way?
Ms. Darrell, we're having a little technical difficulty here. Can you go next, please?
Sure, thank you very much, Mrs. McWhorter. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Bedden and the staff for giving us some information on a fall opening. That's all we ever asked for. I don't know where all these other things came in. We asked to see what that looked like, and I appreciate what you gave us so far. And as far as asking questions on the other things, I like when we have a meeting with discussion, because often questions come up because of something someone else said. So it's healthy to have a discussion, not just being given material. And we had asked for an update. And maybe that's what you called an update then, as you went along with the process of figuring out how to open the schools. There was a lot of accusations made from the community, and I'm not trying to be arrogant to them, but there were some very hateful emails. We don't, as a board, I think it's just up to board leadership and administration where the meetings are held. They said we were home hiding behind computers, and yet we wanted the children to go back. So I think maybe some of the things should be addressed with the community. We all need to work together, whether it's community, the board, it doesn't matter. We all should be on the same page, or at least giving our opinions. We don't all have to think alike, but we're supposed to be a no place for hate, and I think the kids do good. I think maybe they need to address that with their parents after you look at the emails that were sent out. We can agree to disagree and still be civilized and professional. As far as a petition that was done, people from Yonkers, New York, and England, and Oregon, and Ocean City, and other places, that's not a petition that should be even accepted. We're talking about our community here, no one else's, and we have to look out for our children. So when a survey was given to us that we did, with 70% of the parents wanting the children to go back and 60% of the staff, yes, we looked at we asked for what other option you could give us, how it would look for a full opening. And I'm glad I did that, because it gave me some ideas that I hadn't thought about completely. So again, I want to thank the administration for what they did give us, and it's certainly going to help me make some more thought into the decision I have to make. And as far as hurry up, get this done, I thought all along we had the date of July 28th scheduled for the decision. So I don't know where it's coming from that we should quick do this, because the parents need to know, when all along it was the 28th of July. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Hemingway, are you good to go now? No. No. No, we can't hear you.
Just why don't he unplug and see if it can pick him up without it? Just unplug the headphones.
All right, we're working on this here.
Okay, how about that? Anyone can hear me okay?
Now talk.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try to talk loudly. I don't have a lot to say, really. I have a question just to try to so we can understand my thought process from last week and even before that, which really couldn't have been a direct question prior to what we were presented with. This may be an outdated question by now that I've kind of concluded myself by having this opportunity to be thorough and talk and question and just take my time on this. This is a big decision, and I don't believe in a scripted meeting. So here's my question. The data that we used to determine a full opening, did that take into account the reduction in the population who possibly wouldn't be there because they chose an online option? So was that calibration used in that figuring? Because I look at it now, we still have, and I hope everyone's aware, in elementary, close to 4,500 kids, I believe, that are going to be in that building every day. You add up the staggered upper grades, we're still really percentage-wise are pretty high in a full capacity of kids getting online or getting in-person instruction. So I just wanted to ask, was there a variable used in that initial reduction in the population, or did we assume that every kid was going to be there with no online option?
We have to plan for every student to have access to education until they don't register or show up. So we use those projection numbers, and we use the same thing for our model too. So if we deduct students from the full open to make it apples to apples, we need to do it for the other one too, which would even make ours even stronger. So we treated them the same with the projections of the numbers that we do from our student services office that she has, assuming those students who are enrolled are going to come back until they disenroll because they're entitled to a free and appropriate education. But if I took out some percentage of the full, then I need to do the same for the hybrid, which would actually make it even better. But they are treated the same because I have to assume, just like a bus, every student has a right until they tell us otherwise.
Okay, so not fully unreasonable though to consider a full-time, and I'm going to emphasize again, consider and analyze and have a discussion about how those numbers would work. And again, I appreciate the opportunity that you gave us to have a more in-depth look into that survey, to actually have more of an explanation of the numbers within the numbers. So that was extremely helpful for me. And I apologize that I didn't have a direct answer last week, but that's not how I work. I like to be thorough and exhaust all of our options through discussion, so that as one of the speakers said, this is kind of different than some of the other decisions this board's had to make. And I think we need to have a good approach to making that decision. And I think after tonight's meeting and after some of the conversation I've had with some of the administration and some other board members, I feel much more comfortable tonight in that decision. Believe me, this isn't fun. I don't like having to make this decision. This is a potential life or death decision. And it's this time that you have allowed this board to try to process this is very worthwhile time spent. It wasn't a waste. This is what needed to be done to get the community involved. Even if it was negative and you get beat up over it, so be it, it was worth it. And I just want to thank administration, thank board leadership, and thank the board for coming on an extra night that we can discuss this. So with that being said, I do have just another comment that Ms. Tricia and I had during one of our meetings for committee meeting, pandemic conditions, dealing with the flexibility that our educators, our experts are able to determine. So I want to make a clarification on some of the comments about the mask. I think we all can agree the mask is pretty uncomfortable. I think we can all agree that none of us really want to wear this mask. I'm not suggesting that we don't. I'm not suggesting that we go against a governor's order. I'm a team player, everybody. My point was, they were working on a plan originally where masks were optional. Desks were 3 feet apart. So this was a plan that they were working on that they felt was appropriate. It fit our individual community needs from our experts that know our kids and the teachers who are going to be here. My only thought process on that was, and with this new plan, we're still not at 6 feet. We took it upon ourselves to say, we feel comfortable in the spirit of the guidelines and in the spirit of these mandates to come up with a plan that works best for us. So my only statement on that was, what authority do we have locally, as opposed to having a blanketed guideline and rule that may not apply to us individually? So that, I am hoping, is the clarification on the mask statement that I made at 11 o'clock at night on a Tuesday after a long day. And I apologize if that didn't come out correctly, but if I would have had more time, or if I would have taken more time to clarify and have more discussion on that, I think that would have been more clear. And on that note, to clarify safety, I assume we're going to do all this safely and within appropriate guidelines and rules and follow our policies that are already in place. My entire career has been built around making sure kids I coach are safe. Kids that I substitute teach in these buildings. I have the privilege to have taught in every one of the buildings in the Boyertown School District. I know these buildings, I know the conditions, I know what is. And it's emphasized to be safe. So that's built in my daily routine as a substitute. I run a landscape company. In 24 years, not one case, injury, or incident. It's part of my everyday. And I should have not assumed that when talking to the public, I was talking to my board members who know me. That's a characteristic that they already know. So for those of you who I perhaps should have clarified, again, at 11 o'clock at night after a long day, my apologies that that was misinterpreted. Because yes, safety is utmost important, but can we provide a quality education to the expectations that Boyertown has always put on this board and put on this district? But can we do it in a safe way? Next. What do we have? So I do agree with this scaffold approach, but I needed to explore the idea of every day because it could work, could make sense. There are those that I need to answer to who are all for it, but it takes me some time to get my thoughts together, and I appreciate the time that you guys have given me, the opportunity to talk to the public again, as I stated before. But this is a process that is not anything I'm taking lightly, and I'm going to treat it as other votes. I will not subscribe to a scripted meeting or a vote until I am content with my answer. We talked a little bit about delayed openings, and Dr. Bennett, I was excited to see that because we discussed that earlier this week or over the weekend, and you guys do act fast. My thoughts on a delayed opening, and this is, I'm going to direct as a question. And again, you can all see how I have to materialize my thoughts. This is what keeps me up at night, okay? I'm working for you guys. By delaying an opening, it allows us the opportunity, and this is probably going to be taken the wrong way, to see what's going on in the surrounding communities. Not that there are guinea pigs, but there's nothing wrong with a wait and see approach to see what's going on in our communities around us and use that as our own information. That's a good thing. During this delayed time, is there a way that we can use this to our advantage that could be also counted as academic time, as to not interrupt our calendar too much? In other words, this delayed opening is not another 2 weeks to swim in the pool. This delayed opening is 2 weeks of keeping our students safe. There, I used the safe, and out of the buildings where they can get acclimated with their new laptops or equipment that they're receiving. I know when I get something new, it takes me a good month just to figure out how to turn it on. So this will give the students an opportunity to get comfortable with their equipment. This will also give the teachers the opportunity, and I think you'll know what I mean, and I hope you do, but I guess Facebook will tell later, to just sit at their desks in their classroom and adjust. I used an analogy with someone today that whenever we go through an intersection, okay? I had an accident at an intersection. Believe me, every time I went through that same intersection, it was scary. I needed time to drive through it a couple times so that I knew that everything was going to be okay. We need to get our teachers to sit at that intersection, sit at their classrooms, take their time to get used to this new normal. They don't have ideas. Let's use their ideas. But they need the chance to think also. Let's give them the chance to think. So this 2 weeks isn't necessarily time off. We're going to be learning a lot. We're going to learn how to learn. My one concern with the scaffolding program is we still have 80% of the population is going to be going to school. That's roughly, is that around 4,500 of the elementary age kids thereabouts? Divided by 6 buildings. That's still little under 5,000. Little under 5,000 who are going to be going to school every day. Is there a way during this 2-week period that we could implement some online learning in addition to going to school, so where they can actually talk with their teacher about what was happening online at home? They're still having face-to-face connection with their classmates, face-to-face with their teacher. And I'm a little skeptical as these days go on if we are even going to be having school. So we need to start preparing them for if we go the other direction. So that brings me to deciding on plans. I don't know. So it leads me to, what is the most flexible plan? What is the most mobile plan? From what I'm learning and seeing and hearing, everyday instructions are it's like driving a fixed wing plane with 0 controls. You hit turbulence, you're in for one heck of a ride. So we need to derive a plane that has lots of ailerons, rudders, and you name it, so that we can have some flexibility and alter from one way or to the other. So I don't even know if that's the scaffolding plan, but I think it's a good start. So I don't know what kind of guidance administration needs from this point on, but I appreciate the time for you to allow me. I'm an individual in this board. I don't run on either side. I make my own decisions, and sometimes I take my time. But I am recommending, if that's the correct terminology, that tonight at the board, we can give a better direction to this administration towards something. And it seems they have shown us that day-to-day instruction really isn't an option, so it can't even be on the board. It can't even be on the list. So that makes my answer at this point a lot easier. So I don't know how we go about things, the okay to start pushing the administration in a direction that they are more comfortable with. I guess we have another survey coming out, and it would be pertinent to that survey, but I have a feeling it's a pretty close idea of what that is going to be going from our public response. But Dr. Brown, I'm asking you, how do we proceed from here so that we can get the ball rolling again?
You can mute yourself now as you're going to get feedback. So I want to clarify a couple things. One is, it was a week that we were proposing, so I don't want anyone to walk away thinking it was 2 weeks we were talking about. So it's clear. We believe that if we go 2 weeks, the challenge of fitting and keeping the calendar end date the same. What we believe needs to happen at this point is some clarity, because what we walked away with last week was there were a consensus, not a vote, of 5 people wanting to know more about a full day, 5 days a week. The special meeting was called to answer, as Mr. Brophy alluded to, if you can't come up with a plan, and the team was like, there's no way that we can connect this full day option and be able to do what we're asked to do to transition between plans based on color coding, that it was like no way for them, they'd be literally starting all over and building a full day and a whole nother yellow-green plan to match up with it and running out of time. So the focus was to answer the question, and what's the challenge, what's wrong with it, why we couldn't, was what I was told I needed to answer, and thus the meeting being called. That if you're saying that you can't do it, the focus was from the president, and Mr. Brophy, as he alluded to, why is this a problem? We then also had to redirect our resources to try to figure that out. So some things that we were working on, we had a table. So the reason we need to get some clear direction is we believe we need to continue to refine the hybrid plan to address issues that we believe we still need to clean up. But we at least need to know, let the parents know, here's what it's going to look like. So for example, as I said earlier, my comment to the team this past weekend was that I believe we're running out of time to keep trying to figure out the best virtual option with our teachers. Here, what we're looking at, we're down to 2. We just got to make a decision, because we really need to start drilling down to making it work and happen with the resources. So there are 2 parts to this process that we're dealing with. We'd like to continue to clean up the issues with the hybrid plan, even to the point that, as I said to you earlier, I'm concerned, you alluded to it, if the numbers keep trending bad, I have concerns even now about what we thought we had as a good place with 5 days, even with elementary. It is making me nervous. So we even got to deal with, if it keeps getting bad, how do we do even a little bit of a hybrid at elementary level? So we need to develop that. So we keep trying to figure out how we fine tune it to create that fluidity that you saw earlier with regards to going back between green and yellow. We also believe that we need to address our capacity for full virtual. As I said earlier, and you alluded to also, and then Mr. Brophy commented when I made the comment too, that if we get hit with a red phase fairly quickly, we don't want it to look like what we had in March, which, by the way, I still think the staff with such short notice did a Herculean job, but we don't want to have to depend on that. So what you see on the agenda is a draft that one of a resolution that will need to come before the board, that will be a part of it, at least the July 28th meeting, if Ms. Tricia knows what we're doing. It stopped with her work with Mr. Sultanic, because if it's full opening, we didn't need it. If we're using a hybrid, which I think we're going to need to do, as well as for the virtual issue that I think we're going to get hit with, I really do. This is how we deal with the 180 days and the 990 hours. Counting our virtual time is part of that. So that resolution that's there, draft, is what allows us to say we're going to use that time to count to meet the state's 180 days. If we are clear that we're still working and fine-tuning this, she has to go back and finish it with Mr. Sultanic. That covers the district and the board to say they still made sure that we had a calendar, and us as licensed and certificated, 180 days of instruction, the number of seat hours for our students, especially those who have to graduate, that we can literally say you did do what you're supposed to do as a graduating senior to meet those requirements. You also received, as part of my challenge to the team, where Mr. Emeigh communicated to me in a briefing, here's the challenge with expediting our ability to go full virtual. Here's the challenge with instruction. So one was the kids. He had lower grades that we still have not gotten the Chromebooks in yet. You know, we were doing that in phases that they still haven't. We have to, he needs to go ahead and order those. So in essence, he's saying to me, I need to buy these so that every kid is equipped to function virtually and or in the red phase. I have a meeting with Mr. Hayes and Ms. Pitts, who's retired, but she's meeting with us tomorrow to try to identify where is there possibility, any resources to try to address these issues within our normal confines of allocation. Or do I have to say to the board, we're going to have to consider a one-time expense out of your fund balance? The other piece of it is the team is still trying to hone in on what does it look like with the type of equipment in the classroom to do virtual streaming to students, which is an expense also. And I don't know if Mr. Ionelli has anything to share. I know Mr. Brophy looked like you may have had a question before Mr. Ionelli, so you don't lose it. So Madam Chair, I saw his hand.
First of all, thanks for giving us both presentations tonight, because I think that clears up a lot of
Mr.
things.
Brophy?
Yeah.
Mr. Updegrove still hasn't,
I'm sorry.
is in line, and then I am after him.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I have a question too.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll put you after Mr. Brophy.
Thank you.
But I wanted to stop because I saw his hand and didn't want to keep going too far with too much information.
Okay.
So that's all. I was turning it back over to you, Madam Chair. I don't know if, did I answer your question, Mr. Hemingway? I mean, we need these other two items. If we're going to continue the path, we need to talk about addressing to help us fully functional. And that's really the summation of, are we staying the course and fine tuning what we started with? And if so, we need to address this issue that I need to bring back to the board in identifying a plan on how to pay for these things that they need to do this. Madam Chair?
Okay, so Mr. Updegrove, you are next. I'm going to speak instead of Mr. Updegrove just for now, because I'm going to be pretty short. I know that Ms. Nyman was worried about the how many students were going through the high school and things getting cleaned, but I think the feeling that I've been getting lately is about the method of transmission of the virus. It's mostly through air droplets. I'm sorry, what did you say, Ms. Nyman? Okay. And I mean, I still clean all the surfaces where I work, but I think that's the main reason why we're wearing masks is to control that. Also, I want our students to feel safe. This continues to go back to Maslow's hierarchy of, students feeling safe before they can even learn. I do like the idea of the extra week, the delayed opening, that will give teachers and everyone that extra time to adjust. Also, with the delayed opening, Brian, Mr. Hemingway, you were talking about using everybody else as a guinea pig. Just remember that the South starts their schools around August 1st. So I think that I'm sure that we are going to be getting emails from Dr. Bedden looking at the South starting and seeing what it's like 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in. And after Mr. Updegrove speaks, since everybody has spoken, I am going to start using a timer, and I really ask everyone to keep focused on the plan here and not personal issues. All right, so Mr. Updegrove, you're next.
You hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I just really have one or two questions. I know you talked about the parents driving the kids to school. That's going to be a big issue. I drive bus, and if you're going to put another 30 cars at these schools, they're going to be out on the streets, and the police are not going to be happy with that. So that's going to be a big issue with the townships as far as everybody driving their kids to school. Because it's like we're almost out on the road now with the buses waiting to unload. And then you put another 30 cars out there in the parking lot. They're going to be out on the streets on 73 and Congo Road and the other ones. And the police ain't going to be happy with that because you're going to have accidents. Believe me, I see it all the time. I hear the skid marks when I'm in the bus and I'm looking around at who's going to plow into who. So that's not a good thing. The other thing is the survey, the first survey, were the teachers really on board for the first scenario at all? Yeah, I know. I seen the numbers, but you know, they were like 60%. Has that number actually gone up or down? I know you got to be talking to Roth or somebody about that. You know, it's just something.
We have what we call meetings and conference call with the leadership about the plan. And of course, we always ask them not to share things at certain times until we share with the board. And that reaction about where they're at, that was just done this week. So those numbers are current numbers with regards to how teachers feel. That was just done from roughly Wednesday through Sunday of this week from them. So that is what you're seeing is how they really feel right now. And again, just it goes both ways, as we shared with the Hanover Research Survey about perceptions. A survey is about perceptions, not a vote. And one of the things that we had to do was try to balance between teachers and parents, because they don't always marry equally together. And that's what we're trying to do. Now, obviously, everyone agrees on wanting to be safe and healthy. How we do that with the hybrid or how we do that with in-person, you know, that's something that we had to look at. And that's why we were drilling down in Hanover Research. That's why they broke it out. Staff, because we also wanted staff to be able to have a say. So that was a broader staff. It wasn't just teachers, because we have custodians, we have food service workers in the building. All of them are potentially impacted by what decision we make. So all of that was a factor. And then we drilled down, like I said, by level. And what we saw was a more acceptance and interest of a blended or hybrid model at the secondary than more so than elementary. We also, again, factored in the issue of age supervision needs of our community at the time we made this plan, which again was in a better place with the data, the status of COVID-19 that has quickly been changing on us. So what you got is what the teachers really just said between Tuesday and Sunday.
Dr. Ben, can I add one particular point that I think is pretty critical as we move forward with this information? You know, and human resources, Barb's in the audience here. There are teachers reaching out about their comfortability about coming back to school next year. So as we think about staffing our classroom, to Mr. Brophy's point about the safety piece of it, there's a level of concern about staff members even coming back just because of their comfort level and, you know, underlying health conditions and all of those components. So as we proceed forward and get more information, we may be needing to ask the board for more hands-on support as far as teachers go, whether they might be, you know, extended substitutes, long-term substitutes, depending on what our numbers look like. But because of the uncertainty of what the plan looks like, you know, I say that in a, you know, in a kind way without trying to be confrontational, teachers didn't know how to respond based upon what the options were. So, and I can speak to the point too, we were inundated with almost 200 referrals for our BOL program in a week's time based upon last week's meeting, based upon the perception that came out of this meeting from last week. So the impact of what happened is huge. And you know, you saw the social media, you saw those pieces, but the staffing piece is a huge component that is another uncertainty for our district, as knowing who's coming back, who's not coming back, what's the comfort level, what am I going to be required to do? So there's so many unknowns yet that we're just trying to hone in on and trying to get specific direction to provide a plan that is going to be supportive of what we need to do. So I need to put that out there as well.
Only simplified, just like parents, BAs shared with me, staff want to know what the plan is. Barb has heard that because some things are sitting at her desk where staff has said they're waiting to see which way we're going. And that's going to determine what they decide to do. But what, again, overwhelmingly, what they shared with us is that full return, we are going to have a problem with staffing. It's going to really magnify with it. So again, what you saw was Tuesday through Sunday information. And if we don't have teachers, it doesn't matter what plan we pick, we got a problem. And I think that, that's why we've tried to strike a balance also with parental needs and desires and our staff needs and desire. Because I'm sure we probably got some elementary people who may feel I'm not comfortable going every day. That very well could be a concern, but as soon as we know what we're doing and any of what we're doing, and the other piece that happens is once we know what we're doing, now we start also with principals and teams directly working with them on what that is we're doing and pull more of the teachers in the process rather than a representative sample that is sat on committees, on the teams. On our briefing this morning, we had a parent who works in emergency healthcare industry as part of the team on the conference call this morning, representing parents, but also with a certain expertise that they have in knowledge being a part of it, to bring the parent lens, and again, teachers on some of those committees, but then we can, once we know the plan that we're working on, we include them more into the process because we have to start drilling down and principals drilling down with their particular teachers in their building.
All right, so it is 9:30. We've been at this for 3.5 hours. I am going to now put into place the 3-minute rule, and I really want everybody to stay focused on what we need to talk about. So Mr. Brophy, you're next, and then Ruth, Ms. Deeroff, and then Ms. Nyman.
I'll be less than 3 minutes. Dr. Ben, first, thanks for putting the two things together and giving me what I asked for. It's really important that I got that. Going forward, let's try and be honest. We can't get a plan together at this point to open school. So even if we thought that was a good thing to do at this point and get people to do that, it's not possible. So the direction I would look at this point is you're going to have to go forward with the scaffolding plan only, because we don't really have the ability to do the second, to do an open. But what I would like to see with the extra time, which you don't have, it's more of what's the virtual plan going to look like? And I don't mean to do this right away. More is what the virtual plan going to look like when Wolf closes us down again. So how are we going to go to that? And also more of the virtual streaming plan where kids can stay home and still attend their classes.
You're right in alignment with what we're discussing right now.
Yeah, that's
exactly what the direction that was given on Sunday. That's exactly.
To give you any other directions, counterintuitive, it's counterproductive because we can't get there anyway.
We are focusing on how to equip our own teachers to still be the teacher, overly simplified a record for our students, whether they choose to stay home or whether we have to exclude them for medical reasons. And again, the key is, again, Mr. Ionelli, is you got an email, and I thought you needed to see it as soon as I saw it because of the price tag, and then the ability to have equipment in the classroom that we're trying to price out. And again, Carol Pitts graciously agreed. I mean, she's retired, but she said, I'll get on the call with y'all and help her try to figure this out, how to fund it, because it's important. Because I do believe, like you, I'm very concerned that we will end up in red phase.
Yes.
And, as we told legislators, there is red with no one, or also could there be red with just a teacher coming to our classroom with no one in there and providing instruction by themselves to their kids type thing, but it's still the teacher who's of record and knows the children. One of the biggest comments I've read, and it's been a lot of reading from our parents, some like the BOL, asynchronous, because you can go anytime. You could, do work in your pajamas and 2 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter. But ours is going to be a school day type format, but there's always been a request that, but how do we make it our teachers to be doing it with our students? And we're trying to find a way that we're not making them learn a whole lot new other than how to use the information to project themselves to our students versus they got to learn some other technology.
The future's going to be different. We have to, even if we're not going to get there right away, we have to have a plan to get there. So,
and that helps because then
that's
we
the way
need to
look at it.
let Ms. Torsia finish with Mr. Sultanic with the resolution, which you all have to approve, which is basically attesting to the fact that we're going to make sure that we meet the hours of 180 days and 990.
Yes.
It's going to also need further conversation with Mr. Sultanic about the parameters we need to put in place to ensure appropriate FERPA and all those other stuff with what constitutes a record and what are we showing in the classroom and all those type things.
Yeah, so whatever my preference is, it doesn't matter. It's what can we achieve between now and the beginning of school. And that's pretty much what I have to go with. Thank you.
If I can just add that I may be coming back to the board multiple times to make changes to the plan that will be set before you next week, because as things, change, whether we stay in green and move to yellow, there's not much change that I would be proposing. But if things really start to look good and we get out of a phase, then we're going to be looking to come back to school, obviously full time. And if there's other mandates that are, placed upon us by the Department of Education or our governor, then I'm going to have to adjust that health and safety plan as well, and continue to come back and ask for approval, to changes. So this document is going to be fluid. It's going to be hopefully not ever changing, but I'm, feeling pretty confident that there's going to be some changes between now and the start of the school year. So thank you.
And we do, like the athletic one has a modification based on a new mandate that will be coming on the 28th. That you'll get a copy of it in the weekly report with identified what changed, so you don't have to read the whole document all over again. But again, because they made another change, Mr. Palladino has to put that in with a mandate too that we came from Mr. Sultanic that we concurred with, that he had to go back and tweak in the health safety plan on that he had to post to the public. Madam Chair, for the sake of time, I would the resolution thing is there for you to see it. I don't need to. The essence is we're going to test to Mr. Sultanic.
I still have comments from Ms. Daroff and Ms. Diamond. Okay, Ms. Daroff, you are good to go.
Okay, I'll make mine very quick. Thank you very much. I just wanted to tell you that I think maybe all this is going to be in vain, because I think the governor's going to come back and tell us we can't even go in school. I think that'll happen before the end of before it's time to start in August. However, I'm not a mind reader. I do have one question of the board president, because I don't want to do the wrong thing again. I thought we had an understanding that we weren't going to answer emails. We would let him answer them, although we could. So I'd like to know where I get the standard form that's being used to answer parents. I would rather use my own words, but if we're supposed to use a standard form that board members have been using, I'd like to know where to get it. Thank you.
Just to address that real quick, there's not a specific form. I've shared before that I respond to, I try to respond to every email and let them know that acknowledging receipt, and then from there, any board member is free to also respond, share their thoughts with any correspondence that we receive. But I make sure that people that we acknowledge that it's been received. That's the intent of me making sure that takes place. But as has been the case and continues to be the case, anyone is free to make any type of response to the emails or other correspondence that we receive.
Okay, since it was a standard form, identical, I just thought maybe we were supposed to use that. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Nyman, you are next.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had a question from a couple parents regarding report cards, and that in the last 3 months from May to June, that instead of a grade, they received an NA. Is that something we're going to be going forward with, or are they going to be getting their grades like they normally should be?
I can definitely speak to that. We had put communication out in the early parts of the continuity of education plan that at the elementary school level, they would not be getting specific grades because we grade on a standard-based system, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we couldn't possibly correlate that to a score based upon that work time. The goal moving forward would be to assess in normal practices so that, you know, from day one of the school year and moving forward, we would follow our same report card guidelines. Yeah, at the junior high, they were not, the high school gave grades. You couldn't do worse than where you were, but at the middle school level, they got complete grades, and that's where they were not a specific grade, but a completion of what they were asked to do. Again, because there were too many variables in it, so we wanted to be careful with that. Moving forward, our scoring system from K through 12 should be similar to what it was in the past, with modifications based upon what instruction looks like at that time.
I got it.
Okay.
All right. I think we can now move along to the draft emergency resolution about school attendance. I will hand it over to Dr. Bedden for that.
I pretty much reference what it does. Honestly, it was there for you to see. And at this point, it's something that you need to be familiar with if we're moving forward to hybrid, because we have to have that adopted to make sure we're adhering to the 180 days using our virtual format and the 990 hours. And I really don't need to go completely through it. It's really more so for us. We'll make it available to the public once it's finished with the solicitor to say we've dotted I's and crossed our T's so we don't get deemed down the road. But for the sake of time, I don't need to really run through it. It's there for you. I would ask you to familiarize yourself with it so that if you got something you don't understand, let us know ASAP so that Ms. Tricia worker or Mr. Sultanic can get you an answer, because you really need it to make sure it goes through. Because whatever we do virtually will be null and void with ours without that.
All right, so we don't need to act on it tonight.
No, that's why it was draft on it. It was an information discussion item that was put there in case someone had questions at this time. You still have time. I'm not going to ask you to vote on it until the earliest is next week. But it was trying to make access because we don't want it delayed. And you'll get, like I said, the athletic adjustments with whatever change, because we need to get that updated with the additional information we changed on that, and especially with what just happened in our neighboring district. Again, it continues to be fluid with challenges that happen. The big ticket item that we added to this agenda that supports the virtual is what I sent you as soon as, you know, Mr. Emeigh put it in writing. He spoke to me about it. I said, I really need you to put it in writing so I can just let them see it rather than trying to talk through it. Mr. Emeigh, you still here?
Yes, I am, Dr. Bedden.
For the sake of time, can you give a brief synopsis of that issue and see if the board has any question? And then I'll speak to the second part with what we need to do with equipment in the classrooms. So if you could, for the sake of time, make it brief. Obviously, I put your message to me to them, and it's actually on the board agenda just as it was sent. So they do have that information already.
Okay. I'll be very brief. So this year, we decided to upgrade student computers from grades 6th, 7th, 8th, all the way up to 10th grade. So we are Chromebooks from 6th grade to 10th grade, which is very good for consistency in teaching and in support and then transitioning from different grades. Over the COVID time frame, Ms. Tricia alerted me to a grant, and I don't know if I think it's the CARE grant, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we were able to get some funds to purchase additional Chromebooks to kind of, to assign to our elementary students, because the plan was before COVID was to we normally assign a one-to-one program with Windows laptops, which are very clunky for little kids. They have to log in. There's a lot of oversight and time constraints with logging into Windows. So we thought it would be a great idea to continue to build on that consistency and feed the 3 through 5 grades. Actually, the plan was for 2nd through 5 with Chromebooks. So we had about 385,000, which we ordered 1,864 Chromebooks and 1,864 licenses, which doesn't really give us the entire package of Chromebooks that we need to feed the 2nd grade level. So the entire package, which we wanted, was going to cost around 625,000. Of that 385 covered 1,864. The remaining 927 that we do need to feed one-to-one between 1st grade and 2nd grade, we're still short in. So by not pulling the plug on these other additional Chromebooks, we will have I would say it's a deficiency or a change in technology between 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, which makes it difficult for teachers to kind of adapt to different learning styles. So, you know, to be consistent in our approach to technology, that it's easy for students. And I can roll quickly. When we decide to give out laptops between the months of May through June on 4 different occasions, IT had to individually log in for each one of these Windows devices, which takes an exorbitant amount of time. We gave out around 2,500 laptops from those 2 months, and it took a lot of time. With the Chromebook, we just have to hand them a device and they can log in on their own. They don't have to be on premises. So it's a valuable asset to provide, especially to little kids. It's easy to use, and it makes, you know, their transition up to grades 3 through 5 very easy. So we were asking to come up with the additional funds from the tech reserve if possible to complete the transition.
So in our brief call with I was working with Mr. Hayes earlier, and the fact that Carol and others managed it and he's so new, I was not comfortable with making a decision of using the funding source that looks like it has money without including her. So she will be conferencing with us tomorrow to see if what we're looking at is an eligible source to fund this. So that's where we are with that. And then I'll be able to communicate this week, here's how we're going to pay for X, Y, and Z to the board in the weekly report is my hope that we need to narrow this down. The second piece is...
Hey, Dr. Ben, could I add one more piece?
Yeah.
And one of the major things that I did tell to Dr. Ben is timing is of the most critical time frame essence here, because us, like every other school district, have been ordering Chromebooks in mass quantities. And since we order our Chromebooks for 6 through 9 very early, we got them and we're able to prepare them. Right now there is a backlog. So every day that we wait, again, it keeps me up at nighttime. It delays the delivery of these Chromebooks, especially coming from overseas. And then the fact that inventory is extremely low. It is time sensitive. So that's why I'm really trying to push for this to get pushed through.
So the second piece to that is also teaching and learning staff have been going into classrooms and looking at devices we already have and see how they function, to come up with a recommendation of whether we need to buy additional equipment. Mr. Dresser, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Did you ever get that number of how many classrooms we have?
About 450.
Yeah, you guessed it, 500. So in essence, we're trying to figure out how to equip all classrooms for equity's sake. So no matter where in our building, that they have the same functionality. It could be equipment that could be as much as $500 per classroom. To give you an idea, you can multiply it by 5 and see what it is. But that's kind of where we are. That is going to put us in a position to do exactly what we're talking about, with the ability to still go virtual, and a kid who doesn't want to come in school can be at home. And it doesn't mean the teacher can't read or communicate and connect with that child virtually.
Just one other piece, Dr. Ben, that I want to add to that conversation, and Bob, Mr. Ionelli, please chime in, is our bandwidth in our district. we're going to be doing an analysis to make sure, as we all sit in the Zoom session here, imagine every teacher doing a live video feed within their classroom. So we want to analyze the bandwidth within our district and make sure that we have limited issues, if any, when we go to this process. So that could be another piece that might need an upgrade, just as an FYI.
Excellent reminder. Excellent.
Madam Chair, we really need to walk away and understand that we are saying that we need to continue to develop the plan that we gave you all and plug the holes that we believe we need. Our principals are still working on to finish it because we paused them at the moment. We need to continue to work to create the virtual capacity, which gives at least some of our parents and teachers an understanding where we're headed for sure. Because we also need to, the survey question, rather than a broad survey like we did, really start drilling down to, you know, while they have a right to ride a bus, I really would like to know how many of you really do intend to ride the bus to start with for planning purposes. HR needs to really start working with the staff that already talked to her that's sitting on her desk to say, you know, what do you think you're going to do based on now knowing here's where we're headed with it. And then, of course, we need to sit down and plan with the BAE leadership about what it looks like for virtual, because it's going to be new for teachers. And then also bring you back a plan for what a 1 week delay would look like for the calendar. I'm just trying to bring this all together. We got a lot of people watching. Everybody's on the same page. They know what we're planning. You know, it's not final, but they'll have some idea and deliverables to you all.
Okay, so with the virtual capacity and technology devices, do we need to act on anything this evening?
No, okay. It would be, the earliest would be the 28th. We just need it, since we're meeting, we need to talk about it because I need to keep pushing the envelope with the team to get numbers and decide on what the tools are going to look like. It allows me to go back now and have deeper conversations with our association leadership to start planning this out, those types of things.
All right, so does anybody have any thoughts or comments on the virtual capacity and technology devices at this time?
And again, I just want to be clear, we're trying to find money within our capacity. It may mean that we have to ask you for a one-time investment from your reserve.
And let me just speak to that, Dr. Bedden. The ESSER grant is still out there, which does potentially provide support, but some specific concerns are about that, and you know, Mrs. Torsha can speak to it a little bit, are the allowable spending for it, for cleaning, all kinds of supplies, and we want to be super careful that we don't necessarily exhaust that flexible ability in this process. So that is a little bit of a concern, but the ESSER grant is still sitting there, which does provide some funding source.
All right, I see two hands up from Mr. Fuchs and Mrs. Hogan. I am going to hold you guys to, oh, Mr. Fuchs took his down. Did you want to take yours down? Okay, I'm going to hold you guys to 3 minutes, maybe less, just because it's getting late. But there you go. Why don't we start with Mr. Fuchs?
Yeah, so it's storming outside here right now, which reminded me that we've had a couple of power outages, and the Ed Center, I believe, is not on generator backup. I just wanted to ensure that every other building has that backup, so that if we are in an online model and all of these people are depending on us delivering that, if it's within the buildings, are we able to deliver the synchronous? And if it's not, how do we handle like if there's a power outage for staff and students when we're trying to deliver that type of model? And maybe
Russell jump in, but I'll tell you, we scrambled to move over here to your very point that we don't have a generator at Ed Center, but this building does. But he can speak more to how many and how they function directly with the generators.
So in speaking with Bob, if the teachers are using laptops, we have the battery in the laptop that would suffice for an extended period of time. We do have generators at the buildings, and I'm pretty sure, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong here, but most IDF racks are on the backup generators. And they also have oh man, I can't even say, uninterrupted power sources, battery backup, so there'd be no delay in the switch over to the generator. So with that being said, I would say we should be in pretty good shape. However, if the laptop isn't charged or it loses its, it shuts down because the battery's no good, that could be a problem.
That might just be something as far as working practices that we make sure that teachers are reminded just to keep those charged in case something like that were to happen.
I would agree.
Mr. Foose, I would just add that if we were in the building and we were doing some face-to-face instruction and we lost power, we would handle it the same way that we do when students are here full-time, and that is we would look to an early dismissal, because if we can't use water or we didn't have heat, or there was something else that was infringing on the basic needs of our staff and students, we would then have to set up an early dismissal plan.
Thank you for that.
All right, and now Ms. Hogan.
Thank you. So Mr. Foose actually asked one of my questions about backup generators. And then I just really wanted to reiterate that I think we need to do everything we can to create a virtual option. It's our responsibility as a board to make sure that there is that virtual option as a third option, in my opinion, and that moving forward, if we do get shut down again, that children have the best options to learn for the rest of the year. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we want to be clear to the audience. The administration and no one at this table that I've heard, so parents don't freak out, we're saying that we're making that a mandate. The only way that would be a mandate is if we got shut down. It's a choice, and the only way it would be a mandate is if we had to do that exclusion protocol that I shared earlier because of health and safety reasons. So the idea here we're trying to get at is really saying to parents, you don't have to not choose to be a Boyertown student and participate. We're trying to expand that capacity, because at the end of the day, it'll be, ultimately it's a significantly negative impact with already a strained budget. That is, if we lose large amounts of students, it's going to be more costly to us than what it would take to buy the equipment and be more flexible to meet the needs of our population. Again, it's open season right now. I mean, every district on the call today said they're being bombarded with recruitment of their students away.
All right, so I think that concludes everything on COVID-19's health and safety plan. So we can go forward to committee comments. Because of the late hour, I'm really gonna limit you to a minute of committee comment if anybody wants to say anything.
Dr. Baden, did you know about the condition of the student that was hurt yesterday on the practice field? For the
Are you referring to the lacrosse student?
yes.
That was a club sport. We initially found out through social media that Miss Tricia shared with me. We did reach out to the parent. Lucy attempted to reach out to the parent on my behalf to connect me with her. We left a message, and then Miss Tricia sent me an update today. I don't have it in front of me. Do you have that, Miss Tricia?
So one of our teachers within the district had made me aware through the social media that this young man had a heart attack while participating in lacrosse practice. And the student is an upcoming 9th grade student, and I'm looking for the exact communication. Okay, so today there was breaking news, and it says that there was an MRI team came in and said everything checked out with what they did yesterday. All is normal. The clot spray was absorbed and no additional clots identified. Great news. They're referring to the young man as B. We'll be getting the other procedure in 1 to 2 hours. I'm not sure what that procedure was. And then he has been cleared to have the tubes removed. So I know he's been intubated, and they were having a difficult time getting him off of the intubation. So they were looking to get him off of that sometime this afternoon. So if I get any more updates, I will make sure that I put it in the weekly report for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, my concern was the fact that, you know, it was really hot out there, and I don't know if those students should be out there practicing when it's 100 degrees out there, because it just only takes 1 or 2, and you're going to have a catastrophe on your hands.
And there are heat protocols, but this incident was completely separate and had nothing to do with anything with Boyertown athletics. This was a club sport.
It was on Boyertown property, right?
I don't know that. I don't believe from the information that I was shared with, but I can confirm that for you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, and I see Ms. Hogan's hand up. Go for it, Ms. Hogan.
Thank you, Mrs. McWhirter. I just wanted to make it clear that I am joining you virtually tonight because I had been in a tier 3 or a levels 3 zone or whatever they were calling it, a hot zone. So I was literally not allowed in the building, understandably. And then I just wanted to say that I am offering, you know, thoughts to the family of that student. And I would just ask the community at large to also keep him and his family in your thoughts. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
I don't see any more hands up. So I just want to remind everyone of upcoming meeting dates. Next week on the 28th, we will be having a voting meeting. And you can find the rest of the dates coming up on the Boyertown website. And with that, I am looking for a motion. Oh, hold it. Are you? Adjourn. I have a motion to adjourn from Ms. Nyman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Updegrove seconded. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.
Great job tonight.